Hello, everyone. Happy debate day. And boy, do we have a good one for you this time.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I really have. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's good. I haven't actually watched it, so I can't make promises.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's true. I haven't watched it either. I've seen snippets. I've been trying to avoid it.
Yeah, because it kind of I don't want to. It's such a balancing act, especially with a longer debate, because you want to try to find the big areas that you can get rid of because they're irrelevant, but at the same time, you don't want to spoil the new reaction moment
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But this one,
I've had thoughts whether it's good or bad. It's kind of, yeah, you don't want to spoil the new reaction, but sort of having more time to think about it, you could probably, maybe give a better accounting, I guess. So it's kind of a balancing act. You want it to be fairly novel, but at the same time, how much do we think about this stuff? Because Alex O'Connor is not a shallow thing. His arguments are not shallow. You've really got to pass through them. So, yeah,
sure.
and he impresses me. Absolutely impresses me. I think that he is one of my favorite philosophers at the moment, without a doubt. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Actually,
if not the favorite. Yeah.
We should do a quick introduction because James does not do one for these guys. He just goes right into it, which I appreciate. But obviously, everybody here is familiar with Alex O'Connor, formerly the Cosmic Skeptic, just past 1 million subscribers. His partner today is Skydive Phil, who is another skeptic here on the YouTubes. If you haven't interacted with him, and of course the is it Knechtle or Knechtle? Because no matter what, I mispronounce it.
I don't know. It's Knechtle is what I say, but I have no way to know whether that's correct or incorrect. So Phil and I guess Phil and Cliff, Stuart and Cliff. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name. I really don't mean to, but I call them the Knechtles. I don't know if that's accurate. I heard somebody say that, and it's probably just stuck. That's sort of how my brain works.
The Knechtle heads.
The pronunciation. Yeah, apparently I can't pronounce Antarctica. I pronounced it wrong. I've failed in my linguistic obligation, and that's been I'm fine with it. But yeah, they're probably right. It's Katina. That's well, okay. So yeah, and I've never seen Skydive Bill before. Really, really happy to see what arguments he presents, what kind of angles he comes in on. I'm going to be really fantastic. I've heard both Cliff and Stuart before. I think Stuart is a lot better than Cliff. I think Cliff is a little he is a little short-tempered, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. It doesn't make things true or untrue. It's just my opinion. Stuart's a lot more reasonable and easy to engage with, as far as sort of street epistemology and stuff is concerned. So they usually do stuff like hitting campuses and like talking to students and stuff, which I'm always worried about because I think that unless you're a student in some kind of philosophical degree, it's rare to find, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old who has a deep understanding of philosophical concepts. Alex O'Connor is kind of the exception to the rule. I know.
He is that person.
Yes, but at the same time, he was doing philosophy. He understands all of these concepts. Mind you, he had some real great arguments even when he was younger. So, hats off to him. Absolutely, totally understand. But that sort of going around and only talking to young people always raises a red flag with me. It's always like, well, why aren't you engaging people like Alex O'Connor? So at least they've come, and I will concede that they've come and engaged an actual opposition today. But good on them. Good on them. They're actually stepping into a ring with people.
Yeah,
good on them.
Yeah, facing off with actual interlocutors. Before we get going, I want to say hello to everybody in the live chat. Thank you for joining us. As you may be aware, YouTube gives us creators at this general level 10 memberships to give away every month. It's almost the end of the month, and I still had 5 left, so I dropped them. It's the last show of the month, right? You gotta
right.
So yeah, those went to My Unfinished Journey, Mighty Quinn, Secular Rarity. I did not know Elliot watched this channel. Birdie B and Martin Elzen Mexitive. Congratulations, folks. Do enjoy all the fun custom emojis and other bonus goodie. I've been trying to amp up the amount of goodies available for members. We do what we can. I'm hoping to do more member streams as we go, but also further down, My Unfinished Journey just sent a super chat.
Perfect amount.
666. Very nice. And thank you very much. And says, hail Nero, hail Ember and Mark, and hail Critical Thinking. It's pronounced Knechtle. I was big time into InterVarsity back in the day.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. Knechtle. Okay. Gotcha. So I will refrain from embarrassing myself on that one in future.
We're going to stick to continents from here on out.
Thank you.
Yes. That was the bet. I understand it was just like general. So we're talking about Mark's previous stream, Fundamentalist Fails, over on his channel. And
yeah,
I forget who it was in the chat, but somebody kept trying to correct his accent in the way he pronounces.
I think it was. Let me check. It was everybody.
Yes.
Everybody was trying to correct me. Yes.
That's and it became a running joke, and it was.
Yes.
It was better than the material you were covering, honestly.
Well, I must admit that Australians, when we're talking naturally, we are lazy talkers. We drop things all the time. We just, we are the laziest talkers, that's how we talk. So it's hardly unsurprising that I've gotten into my head that, hey, I can skip a letter in this word and still have people understand it. Yeah, I'm going in that direction. That's what I'm doing,
See, here in the U.S., we sometimes do the opposite. Like in South Carolina, for example, when you need to go get petroleum or diesel, in my case, I was driving the tractor trailer when I went through there. They say the word fuel and managed to get an R into it somewhere. I've never been able to pronounce it, but there's definitely an R in fuel somehow. For rural, I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
I went to pick up some fuel.
It's wild. So nice. Anyway, that's where we stand. Alex O'Connor, fresh off his 1 million sub celebration with Skydive Phil, who I am not super familiar with. I'm familiar enough to know his name, but it's not. Cliff and Stewart. Does the God of the Bible exist? So
I specifically didn't know his name. I didn't know his name. Skydive Phil. I couldn't recognize his name, but his face looks familiar. I'm sure I've seen him do stuff before. Right. His face looks very familiar. So I'm sure I've seen some stuff with him in before, maybe taking calls or, doing something like that. I'm absolutely sure of it, but I could not place the name at all. But I'm let's fire it up and see how good he is. I'm really happy to see.
Hell yeah. And it's
I'm excited.
They have a specific claim. It's not just any God. It's the God of the Bible. Yes.
Right.
All right. Like I said, James doesn't even do introductions. He's just like, hey, we're starting with Stewart. Go. And that's where we are.
Thanks, James, Phil, and Alex. Great to be here with you guys. The biblical God, the reason why we believe strongly that the biblical God exists and has always existed is, one, because of moral obligation. I don't believe in just moral feelings. I don't believe in just moral forms.
Oh, there's a dig at Alex. Alex has said recently that he's a moral emotivist, which means that it's sort of relying on moral intuition or moral feelings about things. So Stuart there is having a dig at Alex because he didn't go to moral anti-realism. He went to moral emotivism straight off the bat.
So
he's kind of we don't believe in moral feelings. It's like, well, that's not exactly what a moral emotivism is, for a start. I don't know. It's a very, yeah, I'm not sure how he would justify that. I mean, we all have feelings about moralities, you know, like it's not that that isn't a thing. It's or we shouldn't believe in it. It's are those feelings accurate? Are those feelings, will they guide us to any kind of moral outcome that is justified or not, I guess is the question. So I don't know, like, so saying I don't believe in it is a bit of a category error, I guess. It's not whether we believe in it or not, because obviously we have feelings about it. The question is, should we trust those feelings? So I get what he's saying, but it's a real clumsy way to say it. Sorry. Yeah.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I wasn't even aware that he was throwing shade specifically on a thing Alex had said. It just struck me as like the typical theist. Well, we have morals, therefore there must be a God, and none of these other alternative, you know, phenomenological explanations really make sense if you pretend they don't. You know, not to, you know, steel man his argument too hard.
Yeah, subjective feelings, my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, that our politically correct culture espouses, at least here in the US. We hear it all the time. And so
we hear it all the time from apologists. It's literally just these two and Frank Turek who ever say, this is my truth, this is your truth, live your truth. It's only these guys who bring that up, ever.
I think they're trying to sort of you know, throw shade on some elements of say woke culture that say, hey, I'm living my truth kind of thing, or I'm living up to the truth that I believe kind of thing. You know, I think that he's kind of using it very, very sloppily here, because it's sort of it's something that people mean kind of in metaphor, that they believe that they can do something and they're living up to that truth kind of thing. You know, it is possible for them to implement their music, or to write what they need to write for university or whatever. That's their truth. And so it's this weird thing where we say, hey, I'm living up to that truth. And the truth is that it is possible for you to do those things. I don't think people are actually talking about ontological statements of value. Like, for instance, it's either true or not true that a God exists, right? We don't sort of say, hey, it's true for you and not true for me, right? That's not what any of us are saying. What we're saying is that we believe in certain things, like, for instance, that I can succeed in YouTube, for instance, and I'm living up to that truth, right? I'm believing in that truth. So I think he's really sort of conflating what we mean by living up to a truth. But as far as morality is concerned, the only people that are, I mean, it's weird for them to say, hey, we don't believe in feelings, when they sort of say, hey, morality is written on your heart. So what does that mean if not the feelings you are having about things?
Yeah, like how you had, it doesn't make well, it's a complicated subject, right? Because
right.
there are some things where we feel like a sense of obligation or duty, but that in turn is built on top of another feeling, because we don't want to feel like a disappointment or a failure or whatever. So yeah, it gets but yeah, there's always feelings.
Well, I mean, written on your heart, I often want to know exactly what they mean by that, because to me it speaks of your moral intuition. You know, whatever occurs to you, it's like things that occur to you naturally, and part of that is how you feel about stuff. I don't think Alex O'Connor is wrong when he says that a lot of people just use those feelings, how they feel about any kind of action or any kind of thing that is occurring around them, and go, is that right or wrong based upon how you feel about it? But if written on your heart means something different, I'd like to know what that is, because It can't be literal. And if not your feelings, like you say, hey, I felt this in my heart. What the hell does it mean? But anyway, I'm really straw manning their position, so I'll stop doing that. But you know, I'm just pointing out that it is theists that seem to me to be using feelings as well. They just call it something different.
It's possible, yeah. And random aside, technically a tangent. However, it got brought up by the chat. So first I'll drop a tangent. This episode apparently is brought to us by D20 dice.
Are those actually D20 dice you've got on your?
They are, and they come in different colors.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I linked the $3.99 ones because I'm poor and other people might be too. But yeah, that's what that link goes to. So yeah, that's it. Not sponsored though, but could be sponsored. All right, let's continue. Oh, wait. Okay. We have another super chat. My unfinished sock sends in $2. Thank you so much. And says, don't use bad arguments. Like and share instead. And that is solid advice for everyone. You know, if you enjoy what we're doing here, make sure to like. If you're new here, subscribe.
Yeah.
And if you don't like what we're doing and what we're saying, make sure to share to every social media you have and tell everyone how bad our arguments are so they can come and throw tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And tell them how bad a debater Mark Reed is, so maybe someone can come and debate me. I'm fair game. I'm easy pickings. Trust me.
So whether it's feelings, whether it's inclination, whether it's the idea of I set my own truth, you set your own, or the culture sets it, or the powerful set it, like Hitler, I don't believe that's enough. I believe that Solzhenitsyn, Martin Luther King Jr. were onto something strongly. Letters from a Birmingham jail. Dietrich Bonhoeffer picked up on it as well. Dostoevsky picked up on it. Even Nietzsche picked up on it as an atheist. That without God, if God is dead, then we are dead as well in a way, because anybody can do any old thing they want morally. So when we talk,
that's not what any of those people said. Now, in full disclosure, I'm not familiar with every writer he said. That's not the point of Nietzsche saying God is dead. That wasn't at all what he was getting at. Letters from a Birmingham jail, that King never says anything remotely like, well, if there's no God, then there's no laws. Like, what are you talking about, Stuart?
King wrote about God being the impetus for his morality, and you know, rightly so. He was a pastor. I mean, what are you supposed to say about that? Of course, he would have, but I don't think he said without God, you don't have any morality. I don't think he said anything of the sort. And just because somebody finds a meaningful morality out of a God concept, I don't have a problem with that really, unless it's doing harm to people. I think that sort of Nietzsche was a nihilist to begin with. Yeah, he was an atheist, but he was also a nihilist. So he didn't think there was any meaning behind anything at all, which is sort of what nihilism is. So to take one person and say, hey, he didn't believe that there was any meaning to things, so atheists don't, I think is a massive mistake. I think that's like saying, hey, you know, this leading inquisitor thought that to torture people in the name of God was holy, so all Christians do. It's a wild thing to take one person and ascribe all of their beliefs to everybody that shares one thing in common with them. Why would you do that? Well, it's called a straw man.
Yeah, and I wonder how he thinks that's going to go. Is he going to try to like gish gallop so that his opponents won't be able to address every point he makes, or is he just hoping that that'll just slip right past Alex freaking O'Connor and Skydive? We'll see how it goes. Unrelated. I'm doing an experiment today. I use 2 different eyeliners, one on each eye. So I'm going to drop a poll in the chat, and you can tell me which eye you think looks better, so I know which eyeliner comes off best on camera. And yeah, so I'm going to throw that poll in there because people love polls. Okay. It's interesting. Just random.
I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about oughts, shoulds, moral obligations, values. We get down to the point of saying, no, there really is a truth out there. And I still have not heard a good response to that argument. Second point would be, I think there was a great beginning. And I think that there is a linear perspective that we all espouse, whether we want to believe it or not, shown through all books, many movies, the literature, even many of the narratives that we get in the media, as skewed as they often are, which is a linear approach, which the Bible espouses, the biblical God espouses, where there was a great beginning. All other worldviews at the time were cyclical for the most part, and there was no linear progression. But in the beginning, the Bible starts off right in Genesis with that important form of language, that there was a great beginning. We understand starting in the 1920s, we obviously about 1915, you had Einstein with the fudge factor trying to say, no, the universe is infinite. But again, the biblical God, unlike Zeus, unlike any of the other gods at the time, and post after the biblical God as well, it was a cyclical type of deterministic, almost Hindu form of God. And you need God, you must have God, and ultimately I land on the beauty of God. That's why a big part of the reason why I believe in him. I think we all want grace, we all want forgiveness, we all want to push for things like human.
We all want an argument from consequence.
Yeah. And plus, like, no, Einstein didn't think the universe was infinite. What he sort of said is that if you travel in one direction long enough, you'll come back to where you started, right? It curves in such a way that you can travel infinitely and not reach an edge, right? So it's like the difference between and I saw this in a video. I can't remember who was saying it. I'm sorry, but I saw this in a video that you can travel like around the world infinitely, right? You can travel around the Earth infinitely. Just say you follow the equator. You can travel infinitely, but it doesn't mean that the Earth itself is infinite in size, right? It is a finite size. So it's kind of really counterintuitive. And these counterintuitive things, theists have problems with, because they use their intuition to say, well, that sounds likely, or that doesn't sound likely, and they don't actually want any more evidence. They just trust their intuition. It can be dangerous. But in a counterintuitive way, the universe is finite, but boundless, right? You can't find a boundary to it, but it is finite. It's a very, very strange concept. But just like walking around the Earth, it's finite, but it's boundless. You won't find a boundary to stop you.
And for the same reason, because you can't find the boundary to the Earth, because you are standing on it. The edge of the Earth is what we call the surface. It's the interface. Well, technically it'd be the top of the atmosphere, but details. The matter density difference between the atmosphere and the lithosphere is so ridiculous. You may as well call this space that we're standing in right now, whatever. So it's the surface. You can't find the edge because you're already on it. The same thing is true for the universe. You're effectively standing on the surface of time-space. And as it moves forward, as the universe expands, as the clock ticks, because time and space are interchangeable relativistically, you're on the edge. You're moving around the equator, basically. Now, if you want to shift your perspective, consider what it would mean to go down in space and time. It's weird, right?
Yeah. Well, we're four-dimensional creatures. We can't think outside of those dimensions that we are in. And Carl Sagan used to do an awesome analogy with, two-dimensional man, like a two-dimensional man that would see a three-dimensional object, what that would look like, and how he couldn't understand up and down kind of thing. I spent an inordinate time looking into Ember's eyes as well. It worked on me as well. Don't worry. But that 2D man on a piece of paper will not understand what it means to be up and down. And it's really, Carl Sagan, it was a fantastic, and the way that he talked about, say, a three-dimensional sphere traveling through the two-dimensional space, you would just see, a circle or a circle get bigger and bigger and bigger as it moved down through that. But to the two-dimensional man, it would just look like a circle, but at different sizes, kind of thing. Just really wild stuff that and maybe you'll never experience that, of course.
Well,
but
we do, kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
Conceptually, when we think about black
Yes.
holes, because that's exactly what happens with black holes as they move in, I guess you might say, the down dimension in regards to our left, right, and forward and backward. Their representation in our 4D space as they move across a fifth dimensional axis gets smaller and smaller. It's wild. So I guess you might call mass a fifth dimension. Well, it's not really mass. Mass is the measure of how much deviation there is. But
it's kind of like gravity kind of thing.
It's difficult to conceptualize even with a ready-to-hand visual aid.
Well, of course it is. Just like it would be almost impossible to explain to a two-dimensional man what the third dimension looked like, what that actually was.
Yeah, it makes me think of Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter did a series of books together before Sir Terry died, called The Long Earth. And it's a great story with lots of cool stuff in it. Very, very long. There's 5 books in the series. It doesn't matter. The principle of it is they figure out how to access parallel realities, what used to be called alternate dimensions. And that's the key, because the guy who figures out the technology to do it, he calls the gizmo stepper boxes. And you can move a lever east or west. And instead of stepping left or right, forward or backward, you step across this other dimension, this east-west dimension, for lack of a better term. And in typical Terry Pratchett fashion, in order to make it work, you have to build the device yourself. You can't have it manufactured at a factory, and it's powered by a potato. No particular reason. It just has to be there, so your subconscious will believe that it'll work. Because it's actually something you're doing, but you can't do it without the gizmo. It's wild. But yeah, it's you step across dimensions east and west. It's a fun concept. Anyway, we've deviated a little bit, haven't we?
yeah, absolutely.
That never happens here.
Tangents.
Human rights. Look at the social movements in this day and age. We all want a form of justice for all. When I'm counseling those who've gone through spousal abuse, who've gone through the death of a loved one from ODing because of a bad drug dealer who laced the drugs, I get to see it. He gets to see it all the time. Our experience tells us that this is an unjust world, and everything pulls us to the scales of justice. And we need a judgment day in order for justice to truly win. And we want eternity. Eternity is set in the hearts of man and woman.
So lots of consequence. We want there to be a judgment. We want there to be something that resolves this conflict between a perfectly powerful ultimate justice God and the fact that the world is fundamentally unjust. We want there to be a resolution. We want. But the thing of it is, that's not only no way to reach a conclusion. I want to win the lottery. That doesn't mean it has to happen.
Right.
But also, we could concede Stewart all of his points, and it still doesn't give us even a God, let alone his God.
Right. Yeah, and the whole thing is, well, he's only pointed out the human implemented injustices in the world. So I talk a lot about natural evil, like things that harm us that we wouldn't say is intentional, but the theist would. Because if God is sending earthquakes and volcanoes and having malaria affect babies so they die, that isn't evil to me, because that's just the way the world is occurring. There's no intention within the malaria virus to, target a baby. But if God is sending that directly, then he intended for that baby to die. That's part of his plan. So I noticed that he hasn't brought up any examples of what I would say is natural evil, like these nothing to do with humans. They just occur, and there's insane amounts of suffering throughout the scope of human history of these events. Like Pompeii's volcano just wipes out a town and solidifies them. What's the point of that? Is that going to be corrected in the past, and who are you going to punish for that? Is God going to punish himself because he's the one that's doing it? I don't.
He kind of did with the whole, giving birth to himself so that he could sacrifice himself to himself as a loophole to get out of rules that he's in charge of. There was a whole lot of
that was to forgive
involved
us,
there,
not him. That was to forgive us, not him. Right. So
maybe,
like, he's perfect. He can't do anything wrong. So why he wouldn't need to address that justice, because what he is doing is automatically just. And that's where the problem of evil comes, that this God is doing what is just. So therefore, as a theist, you would have to believe that any plague that God puts upon humans is in fact just. It is just because we are fallen beings that rebelled against God and did something that he didn't want to do. And the fact that it involves a talking snake just makes it more hilarious. But, Alex is going to pick up on this. I have no doubt, that he didn't mention all of these things that occur that has nothing to do with human intentions. And if we're going to punish somebody for them, we punish God for them, because he's the one that, if not did it himself, definitely authorized it.
And we see that happen biblically in Job and such, hey, right. You angel, go kill that man's children and cattle and things. It's either ordered or authorized. Got to pick one.
And I believe strongly, again, from my experience, that our hearts are restless until they rest alone in you, O Lord, like Augustine talked about. All of that fits my experience.
Wait. First of all, Augustine, not biblical. He was a rhetorician who helped rewrite the Bible to make it more manipulative. But he did not actually write the Bible. Second problem is, even if what he said counted as scripture somehow, even though it's not in the Bible, never mind that.
Right.
This idea of your heart resting alone in the Lord runs counter to this wishful thinking, this argument from consequence that Stuart's so invested in, of having eternal life with your loved ones. Are you alone with the Lord, or are you with your loved ones?
It can't really be both.
I mean, maybe the laws of logic don't apply in the hereafter.
Maybe, but then they're not universals. And so one of your arguments, the transcendental argument, which hinges upon logic being a transcendental thing, has been taken away. So I'm not sure that they would lean into that one, but hey, they might.
I mean, expecting consistency from a theologue is probably asking too much. But
it's probably a mistake. Look, I'm expecting consistency. I know I'm going to be disappointed, but I still expect consistency out of intellectual arguments. I'm sorry. I might be a moron. I expect consistency.
Oh, Probing Time makes an interesting point. Apparently, my left side has better lighting, so it might be looking better because of that, not necessarily because of the eyeliner. I should have factored that in and controlled for it in my experiment. Yeah.
Well, here's what you do. Next time you switch which one is which, right? So you have a control and you switch which one is which, and then you do the same experiment again and see if the light side still gets better responses. If the other one gets better responses, then it's not the lighting.
Maybe so.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I suppose it's worth a try if I can remember which one's which long enough to switch. Because right now I have them set side by side with each one corresponding to the correct eye. But yeah, all right, I'll end that poll. 40% said the light side. 26% said about the same, honestly. 20% said I'm only listening, and somehow saw well enough to select an option. And the lowest one was the microphone side at 13%. So it's the right side is pretty dominating out of the false dichotomy of only the two options, but no clear victor. Interesting.
Right.
And so this is not just an intellectual game that we're playing in our minds, whether it be philosophical or theological. it gets right down to your very experience of things like free will, consciousness, things like beauty, things like a judgment day. Will there be one? And protagonist, antagonist of just about every story talks about there being real evil, there being sacrifice, and ultimately good will triumph. So that's a big part of the reason why
that's what defines a mythology, Stuart. Is
right.
It talks about a mythological cultural narrative. The fundamental aspects are three parts. Where did we come from? What is our purpose? What is our destiny?
Right. And real life doesn't work like that. Real life is, sometimes it's the good person tries their hardest and still fails. That's reality, Stuart.
And
this whole thing of
crappy people succeed tremendously.
Elon Musk. It kind of speaks volumes that he's sort of going, well, all the stories are good guy struggles, good guy triumphs, and good guy overcomes. And then, if you pair that with what he's saying, that if you don't have a God, then there is none of that triumph over the end. It's really pointing at that wishful thinking born out of the narratives that he believes, that good will always triumph in the end. But if you look at history, that is not the case. That is not what happens in history. It's sometimes the good guys win, sure. Sometimes the bad guys win.
Yeah. And even if it's a temporary of evil gets defeated in the end, the Third Reich is overthrown by the alliance of the US and the UK and the Russians and so on. And yay, hooray, good triumphed. Except before that, evil triumphed. The Third Reich overran most of Europe and killed a whole lot of people. And there wasn't justice for those people. So, yeah, but Anarchic Fox makes a really good point. If good does ultimately triumph, what's the point of the exercise? If it's a foregone conclusion, what are we even doing?
Yeah, and he makes a really good point, Fox does, that if everything's going to be corrected by a God in the end, why should we try to implement justice on this world? It's all going to be taken care of. What's the point? Why should we even try to implement justice if it's all going to be taken care of at the end?
Ooh, Marty, it's somewhat tangential, but Marty says there's a movie called When Evil Lurks, and the evil wins in the end. It's sick, but a really good movie. There are a couple of movies like that, and sometimes they're really, really nifty. But you reminded me of a novel I wrote and published a long time ago. I won't say what it is because it's under my dead name, but the original working title was The Bad Guy. I wanted to write a story where the bad guy wins to show it could be done, that we didn't have to follow the same tropes and cliches all the time. It was a pretty fun story. Ooh, Cabin in the Woods. I love Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, I love that movie too.
Yeah.
I believe in God based off the intellectual evidence as well as my own experience.
Thank you very much. We'll kick it over to Cliff for the remainder of their opening statement.
Okay, they're switching over to Cliff. Real quick,
Cliff,
left-handed Jedi, throwing out a super chat. Shit, I forgot to set a goal for this stream. I only tried it for the first time on my Christmas. I know you don't have to, but I tried it.
No, but I'm saying just set the goal and count the one. Like nothing. There's no thing that forces you from not counting these super chats. I mean, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. It is just we don't. Yeah, it's fine. Anyway, left-handed Jedi sends $10. Thank you so much, Jedi, and says, I've got one for you. It is a different take on the problem of evil and hell. It goes like this: why should Christians receive an eternal reward for a finite life?
Why should Christians receive an eternal reward for a finite life? Well, I think that they would answer to steelman their position. They would say that's because God is generous and that you don't deserve an eternal reward, but you get one anyway because of the generosity of God. As I think Matt Delahunty pointed out, that sort of perfect justice, it conflicts with perfect mercy, because mercy is a suspension of justice. And I kind of agree with that, So if you're getting, how can you have a perfectly fair God if you are getting a infinite reward for only finite things that you've done, well, you'd have to have some kind of generosity there. You know, it wouldn't be fair. It would be stilted in your favor. But that's where they can appeal to, well, God's being incredibly generous to you and merciful to you and giving you something that you don't deserve. So I think that would be steel manning. But no, if I've gotten it wrong, definitely do tell me, Left-Handed Jedi.
I'm making a mess of things. It's fine. Okay, I did create a goal. Obviously, we already have 2 super chats that are teal or higher, which is the default it's set to. Again, this is only the second time I've done it, so I'm experimenting with it. But
yay,
we only need 8 actually.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. What's the reward? Snake picks. Ooh.
Yeah, people.
What kind of snake are we talking about here? Is it serpent in the garden kind of stuff, or what do we?
Kinda.
The reason that I believe in the biblical God is, first of all, I believe that non-existence cannot produce existence. That's absurd. Secondly, I don't think it's possible for chaos to produce order. That's ridiculous. Thirdly, I don't believe...
I'm going to stop him there because this just came up when I was talking with my son.
Right.
My car situation has been hectic. TLDR, multiple bad things interacted with each other in such a way that a good thing came out of it. It was a very small good thing, but still a good thing.
Yeah. Yep.
I ended up with a car with remote start, which is a thing I've always wanted, especially in the winter. So it's cool that it happens to be there. And so we were discussing the concept of bad things interacting in a way that they like negate each other to cause a good thing. And that reminded me of a thing that I've said many times on this channel, that there's it's not technically a philosophy, but for lack of a better term, this idea that there is no order in the universe. What we perceive as order is the difference between the maximum possible entropy and the real observed entropy. That gap looks like order from our perspective. And when Cliff says something like, well, you can't have chaos cause order. Yes, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I use a clip of metronomes syncing up. It's called spontaneous synchronicity. It's basically things that are in disorder can just sync up through the natural laws of physics to be in order. We see it all the time with weather systems. We can predict the weather because there is an order, but the system itself is wildly chaotic. We absolutely can get order from chaos. It spontaneously will arise due to the conditions around it. This is what chaos theory says. This is the whole basis of chaos theory, that there is order in chaos, and that chaos and order aren't necessarily opposites. Like you say, it's just that we compare what is a chaotic system or a system with high entropy to a system with low entropy and say, hey, one is chaos and one is order. But you can, with injecting energy into it, that chaotic system can absolutely reduce its entropy. Like, it's not a thing that can't happen. This whole thing of it's almost like he's talking metaphorically here. Well, chaos and order are opposites. No, they're really not. It's a spectrum of chaos and order. They are essentially the same thing. Just one is high entropy and one is low entropy. That's all.
It's this weird tendency that we've noted several times in theists of dichotomous thinking, black and white thinking.
Yeah. Black and
Everything
white,
is only two exclusive options. And in some ways, maybe it's because of that apologist tendency to study a little bit of philosophy and then try to squeeze the Bible into it instead of learning more, where they learn the laws of logic and they're like, oh, identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. Everything is a dichotomy. It's either this or this. Everything is a hammer. Everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm speculating. I could be going off half-cocked here.
Believe that it's possible for the rational to be created by the non-rational. The rational points me to a rational creator. Next point is,
okay, Cliff. Cliff. We don't think that atheists don't think that we've been created at all. You're sort of saying, hey, it's been created. When can the rational be created by the non-rational? At some point, whoever basically came up with the rules of rationality, created them. We created our system of logic. Aristotelian logic came from Aristotle. So was he irrational before that? We don't it's this. What are you talking about? All of this sounds like poetic nonsense to me. I don't understand.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
kind of reminds
understand
me
what
of
he's talking about.
how could the inventor of the internal combustion engine have built an engine without already having the engine? Well, that's
Right.
why would he invent a thing if it were already invented? I mean, maybe he'd improve on the design, but also bold of Cliff to include himself in the category of rational things. Now I'm just being rude.
Okay,
but
that's a bit of a low blow, but sure. Yeah.
I mean, if the shoe fits.
Comes from matter, or that
well,
both comes
it
from
kind
matter.
of is this. Again, it's the black and white thinking. I think there's what we started to get more and more rational as our civilization developed, as we had to have some sort of socio communicative transfer of information between us. We got more and more rational as we do that. I don't think it's like this. Well, we were completely irrational, and then suddenly, boom, we were all fully rational. I don't know. It's this whole idea that we're just there's this cutoff point. I don't see that.
Yeah, to me it's a lot like learning a language, because it kind of is. It's
yeah.
It's you aren't born knowing the language that's your first language, and there is no point at which you are fluent at that language. It's a very gradual process. I mean, hell, I learn new words almost every flipping day, and I forget other words, but never mind that. The point is, there is no moment when you're boom, you speak that language. There is no moment when boom, you're rational, or your species is rational, or whatever the case may be. Everything is a process, which is one of the reasons that I'm so chronically optimistic, because I don't just look at the past and see how far we've come as a species. I look at the past and see how far we've come, and then see that we are not the pinnacle of all existence. We're another stepping stone. And I look at where we might go in the future, and that makes me unreasonably excited. Our possibilities are
I'm
fun.
Oh, it unfathomable. And we are a young species. Some of the species, the dinosaurs, were around for millions and millions of years. So if we can stop destroying ourselves and sort of be sustainable for our long-term future, there's so much potential there from what we've done in a very short amount of time. It's been a slow and painful start. Let's get better.
Yeah. I really wish, if there were one thing that I could inspire mankind to focus on a little bit more, is, building a better future. Like, we spend so much time bickering about the fucking present. And yeah, that's important. We can't ignore it. But instead of murdering each other over who's right about which fable, maybe we could build a better future for all of us. I don't know. I think that's what we're trying to do here in a roundabout sort of way,
Or that free will comes from matter. Matter is simply matter. And when I observe people, when I experience life, I'm convinced that there is more to reality, there's more to you, there's more to me than simply complex chemical reactions, than simply matter. Then when I look at Jesus Christ, I begin to understand
so
that
you know what
indeed
fallacy this is?
Composition division.
Correct. Yes. So we've got a division fallacy, or a composition fallacy, rather. He's kind of saying, well, none of the particulates of humankind can do any of this stuff. None of that can rationalize and make all of these intellectual statements, because we're just these particulates of atoms. There's nothing in the atoms that can do that. And you say, well, there's nothing in the atoms of my computer that says it can, run calculations on numbers and show a graphic to me. There's nothing about all those little molecules that would possibly do that. No, it's an emergent property of all of that put together. So that's what we're sort of saying. You can't say because the pieces of that thing can't do it, therefore the entire thing can't do it as well. And that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, I look at things in a bit more of a physicalist sort of way. But as I've often said, we can do this. With it's mind control. Yes, there's a series of physiological signals traveling through nerves that cause twitch reactions in muscles that make that happen. But like the atoms that make up my fingers cannot do this on their own. It requires the entire complete system. And it's an emergent property. I mean, we're matter able to move matter of its own volition when you think about it at a very simplistic level. But with a more holistic understanding, it makes complete sense.
Reliable. No, I cannot prove God. I cannot prove Christ. That's not the question. I can prove almost nothing.
Well, then what are you doing here, Cliff?
Well,
Did he just concede?
Well, I don't expect people to prove it. Like, I don't expect people to, prove as in like a scientific proof, like we have a proof for mathematics, because it really doesn't get into proofs. I just want reasonable evidence to be able to believe it. And that has not been forthcoming. So I don't expect anybody to prove it. If you mean prove as in colloquially, oh, well, I can prove that my wife exists, then yeah, absolutely, I want you to prove it. But if you're talking scientifically, well, yeah, I don't expect you to prove it, but having some sort of reliable, reasonable evidence to show that there is a cause for you believing in it would be nice.
I go a little bit further with that. I do want them to prove it because they're making the case. Okay. They're arguing for a specific God with specific attributes. In this case, literally the one described in the Bible, this book. And in this book, their magic dude appears to the fellow who at the time was named Saul. Like, this dude hated his followers, chased them around, persecuted them, arguably killed a bunch of them. And the Jesus man saw fit to appear to this dude. If this all-powerful being exists and he appears to freaking Paul, theists often say, what would it take to convince you? And sometimes, we come up with all sorts of interesting things. For Chris Mallard, it's smite my coffee cup out of my hand. Other people have different things. I want Jesus to appear to me like he did to Paul, because if he can do it, if this God is real, then there's no reason he can't do it, But that's just my rant on that.
It would be a triviality for a God.
Yeah. And if you want to claim he's real, and there's you're talking about that specific being, and there is a specific criteria in the text that supports it, like, he should be able to do the thing that he's already done. Ay.
And a God that has perfect knowledge as well would know that I wouldn't be convinced by any of these dumb arguments any more than Saul would be convinced by any of these dumb arguments. He obviously knew that nothing short of, sending this message would convince Saul, so he did so. And it would be a triviality for him to do that for everybody, but he doesn't. But he would know that, any reasonable person would not be convinced by the arguments he sent with his messengers, i.e. the Knechtles.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's not an unreasonable criteria. Like, as you said, you can demonstrate your wife exists. We've seen her on your streams. It's not that hard. And these two are going to say they can demonstrate their divine being exists on the same level, but they only show up with arguments. It's kind of a demonstration of their inability to do what they said they can do. It doesn't prove that what they're saying is false, but that their case is a lot weaker than they represent it.
Nothing in life. Rather, the question is, in light of the evidence, what is most reasonable, what is most plausible to believe? And when you look at the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead, I think the evidence is rather clear. He is trustworthy in a way that none of the options are. Whenever I struggle with doubt, and
there's so much in that.
What does that even mean? Yeah, he's trustworthy in a way that the physical evidence isn't. I don't understand how can he validate that evidence is trustworthy? How does he validate it?
I mean, it's like saying, so I met this used car salesman, and sure, he lied to me a lot, but all the used car salesmen do. But he handed me a contract that says in the contract, I promise I'm not lying. So he's more trustworthy than any of the other options. What do you, what?
Yeah, I don't understand. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying maybe he could take us through how he has verified the trustworthiness of this deity. And if he just says, well, the Bible says he's trustworthy, well, wasn't that Bible dictated by him? And then your used car salesperson thing comes. If he says, well, I've prayed to him and things have happened, how do we then determine it was the prayer that caused those things to happen? Because if you sort of pray for rain, it's going to happen eventually. That's why rain dances, are seen to work, because if you dance for rain, as long as you keep doing it, it's going to happen.
Yeah. I as you know, I grew up on a farm, and, building barns on hot summer days. I was a very mystically minded child. And, some days I'd be like, man, if there was just a breeze. And so I'd think about it, and I'd mentally try to conjure a breeze. And as long as I kept doing it, eventually the breeze came. Therefore, I have magic wind conjuring powers. See?
Right.
Eventually the breeze came.
You need a control in that case. You need to not pray to God and see if the same thing happens, or not pray for a breeze and see if the same thing happens. Because if the same thing happens, then it's nothing to do with the prayer. And I don't think that theists often do that. They say, hey, we pray for, I prayed to get money from somebody to, repair my van or something, and it happened. I don't think they stop praying and then see if something good happens anyway. They'll probably find that, the good thing will come along eventually anyway.
And in fact, we do see that in real life too. Like, there's a rather lot of us who are notoriously not fervent prayers, and occasionally good things do happen anyway. For instance, totally unprayed for, a super chat just manifested in the chat from James Norloff.
Well, I was praying for it. I must admit, I was praying for it.
I see. James sends $1.99. Thank you so much, James. And says, I only follow the dude. He abides. Behold, the dude doth abide. Hell yeah.
I regularly struggle with doubt. I go over some of the points that I just made, but I also go over the alternatives to Christ, be it materialism, atheism, evolution, agnostic.
Record scratch. Evolution is an alternative to Christ?
Well, I don't understand that, but I really think there's a straw man incoming here, because I don't think Cliff has really, when theists usually go, well, I've gone over alternatives and none of them satisfy me. It's kind of like, I feel like that you want answers to things and something gives you an answer, therefore it's the best one, which is never a good way to find out the truth of something.
I mean,
like if you're saying
his ministry is literally called "Give Me an Answer."
Right.
So that's
right.
his thing. And no matter how many options you consider, it's still going to be a false dilemma, because there's always options you didn't think of.
Right. And, I'm not so concerned with whether I've got an answer. I'm concerned with whether the answer I've got is the correct answer. it's pointless having an answer if that answer is not correct.
I don't know is superior to a falsehood, because a falsehood can steer you wrong. And as I've often said, when you pretend you've got the answer, you stop looking for the real answer. But also, whatever the hell Cliff is about to say, do remember that the alternative that he has selected as the superior option includes talking snakes, donkeys, and carpenter ghosts.
Yes. And I want to point out there's a quote by a great man, a great author. I think it was Mark Twain. I could be wrong about that, but he says it's not what we don't know that gets us into trouble. It's what we think we know, and it just isn't true. And I'm paraphrasing what he said there, but I think that's what Mark Twain said. And it is true. Okay. So it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
Love it. And that tracks. That reminds me of another quote that gets often brought up in atheist spaces, which I'm bad with quotes, so I'm also going to paraphrase, but it's something along the lines of, faith is pretending to know what just ain't so. And I kind of like the rhyminess of it.
Yeah.
Gnosticism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. And although there are points that can be made on behalf of all of those options, those points are nothing when it comes to credibility, when it comes to reasonableness, when it comes to reliability.
Reasonableness and reliability from Christendom? Really? Again, talking snakes, talking donkeys, and credibility from this book. Are we reading the same book? Now, Cliff may have a different translation, but the story is generally the same, or more precisely, the 4 mutually exclusive stories.
Right.
What?
That we don't know who wrote them. How are we supposed to judge the credibility of a book that we don't know the author of? Because newsflash, about the only thing we do know the authorship of in the Bible is Paul's letters, like the Pauline epistles and things like that. That's about all we do know, because we don't know who wrote the Old Testament. It's generally said to be Moses, but Moses writes in it about his death and events after his death, which I'm damn sure he didn't write that. Well, that's true. That's true. But, you know, like, I that's generally who was accounted, but we don't know that it was Moses that wrote it. And Moses probably wasn't even a real person as far as archaeologists and historians are concerned. And the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we don't know that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote them. They probably didn't. You know, from looking at the way they were written and what they were written about, it probably wasn't written by them. So how do we even begin to say this book is credible when we don't know who the author was, what their intention was, when it was written? We know nothing about it. It's really weird to hear this. That sort of credible, you know, there's no book more credible than the Bible, when I wouldn't even begin to know how to evaluate its credibility. I really wouldn't.
Yeah. Now, partial credit to Cliff. One of the things that I often present as a reason to be agnostic, if not straight up atheist, is from the neutral position. You're not raised in any particular faith. All these preachers come at you, and they've all got their holy books. You know, Cliff has the Bible, and an imam has the Quran, and a guru has the Vedas, and so on and so forth. Everybody's got their own holy books. They all make the same sorts of claims on the same total lack of evidence. Which are we to believe, and on what basis? So from Cliff's perspective, apparently he has some criteria he's using to elevate the Bible above all the other holy texts, and maybe it's valid and maybe it's not. But remember, he included evolution in his list, a thing that we can demonstrate and is reliable. So the fuck?
Yeah.
That support Jesus Christ. He lived a sinless life. In my best moments, I wish that I could live like Jesus, but I failed miserably. He taught amazing teachings. Robert Cole's
we actually know he didn't, Now, whether you want to, go the mythicist route and say Jesus never existed, or that he was a literary construct, an amalgamation of potentially real people, whatever.
It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Even if you'd go with the Jesus in the Bible, it says he led a sinless life, but it also demonstrates him showing wrath, which is a cardinal sin.
Yes.
So what are you talking about, Cliff? If your story is true, then your account of your story is not true.
And he said that he didn't have to wash his hands before dinner, right? Which is one of the sins by the Jewish tradition. So you're sort of saying, hey, he led a sinless life because he decided what was sinful and what wasn't. So anything that he did, he just goes, well, that's not a sin for me.
Yeah, the same reason God ordering the annihilation of several tribes of Canaanites. Well, that's not a sin for him. Watch those goalposts move on down the fields while the special pleading teams take the stand,
Oh, there's more goalpost moving than FIFA World Cup, like seriously, it's basically a special pleading argument that, hey, all of these people sinned except for Jesus. Well, he did this, this, and this, which was against his religion. Oh, because he was the real special, sinless person that made the new rules, so it wasn't sin. It's like this, well, yeah, if I can do that, if I can say, hey, I have a ministry and what I say, I can give exceptions for shellfish and I can give exceptions for, all of these things, it's not sin, then someone could look back and say, hey, Mark led a completely sinless life because, I said that wrath and all of these things are not sin for me. So what?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, similarly. A thing that I used to have a lot of fun with. I had a friend who believed that it was a moral obligation for him to sin so that Jesus's death counted for something, right? You want to give the good Lord his money's worth, so to speak. And after I got ordained, I kept absolving him because that was a power I had as an ordained minister. I was like, your sins are forgiven. And he's like, stop it. I have to start over. So, I mean, as long as I kept following him around, effectively, he'd live a sinless life.
Yeah.
James Nordhoff sends $1.99. Thank you so much. And says, didn't see the goal, more snakes. And include some snakes. So, hey, maybe we'll see. We will see. It's the second time trying this goal, but I need more ideas for goals. If you have ideas for future goals, leave a comment in the actual comment section after the show. And if you see a comment that you agree with, like that comment. So yeah. And we'll see if we can get a greater diversity in our goals up in here. James Nordhoff sends $4.99 with more snakes. Thank you so much.
More snakes.
James really wants to see some snakes, which is fair because we all know a huge chunk of the atheist community loves to see snake.
And I want to see the talking snake. I want to see the talking snake. That's what I want to see. Please present the talking snake.
I wish I had a talking one. That would be neat.
And as my friend Taylor points out, the snake was right. Why was the snake correct? Why was the snake the correct one? Like God said, on the day you eat of that fruit, you will surely die. On the day you eat of that fruit, you will surely die. And the snake said, no, God's just afraid that once you eat the fruit, you'll have knowledge of good and evil like he does. What happened there? They didn't die. They had knowledge of good and evil like God does.
And one of my favorite things about that is watching Ken Ham talk until he's blue in the face about how we have to take Genesis literally. When it says day, it means a 24-hour day. And then you get to that section and suddenly, it means spiritually, or, a day to God is like 1,000, and all the excuses. Everywhere else, it's a literal day. But when it's right there where it's God told the first fucking lie, now we have to dance in circles around what day could possibly mean. I love it. It's so fun. It's an entertaining afternoon.
Yep.
Professor Emeritus at Harvard pointed out that all the teachings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. He not only lived an amazing life, not only taught an amazing life, but he died an incredible death. At the moment of his most excruciating pain, instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But fourthly, and most importantly, not only did he teach amazing teachings, not only did he live an amazing life, not only did he die an amazing death, forgiving his enemies who nailed him to the cross.
Well, he also, I mean, assuming the Bible is to be believed, he also said, Father, why have you forsaken me? Which sounds a lot like a guy who bought into his own BS and suddenly realized that what he'd been preaching was bullshit.
Is that the Garden of Gethsemane?
I'm talking about like his last words on the cross. I think forgive them for they know not what they do is, I'm not sure exactly when that happens. It may be while it's on the cross, but I thought it was before. It's not super important.
Yeah.
But fourthly, and most important.
Weird, though, that he, being God incarnate, doesn't forgive them himself, though. Very strange.
The historical evidence is 3 days after he died, he rose from the dead. So due to that evidence, I am convinced.
What evidence, Cliff?
What historical evidence? Yeah, I don't.
I mean, this book is very old. It's historical.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's historical evidence.
I don't think it works like that. Like historical evidence is usually, not a religious book from the time. Like we don't get the Bhagavad Gita and say, hey, it's old and it was in history, therefore everything it says is correct. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is getting kind of old now. That makes it historical. And that means it's evidence that we've been able to raise the dead for a couple hundred years now. Neat, huh?
It's weird. It's very strange. Like most biblical scholars don't say that it's a book of history. They sort of say, hey, it is a text, and it's an important text. I don't disagree. It gives us a lot of insight into how people of the time thought. No one's saying that it's a useless book. It's just, we've got to sort out the mythology from the actual history in it. There's no doubt there's historical things that are true, like Pontius Pilate was definitely the guy who was in charge of the Roman, the Roman governor at that time. And, all of these things are true, but that doesn't mean everything in it is true. And there's evidence supporting that claim in that book, but there's no evidence supporting the claim of the resurrection in the book. Find that evidence, because it's saying that a guy rose from the dead is just a claim in a book. That's all it is.
Yeah. And it's not even a unique claim. It's not even a remarkable claim in its time. As Josephus tells us, there were dozens of dudes making identical claims, and there were hundreds of years and countless mythologies with identical claims, which these apocalyptic first century preachers were basing their ministries on. So, if the one's true and the others are false, you got to demonstrate that. You're saying, oh, all the rest of these are fake, but mine is the real one. Okay, cool. Show me. Oh, I can't though. Well, then I don't believe you, friend. Eric Wander gifting 10 Emberships. Thank you so much, Eric. Eric's just dive bombing members, which is really cool because we haven't. So for those of you who aren't familiar, members get to vote on new emojis when the slots open up, and it's been a long time since the slot opened up. But maybe we'll start to head in that direction again, which would be really cool. Those went to Clairview, Tori Swansinger, Jenny Morgan, Booba Sweat, Drew Zilla, Michael N, KCA Randy, Subtle Dragon, Delicious Danish, and Andrew Christofferson. Do enjoy all your fun custom emojis, the members exclusive content, behind the scenes photos, all kinds of goodies. And thank you once again, Eric. I appreciate that very, very much.
That Jesus Christ is reliable in a way that none of the options are. Now, there are two good reasons that I know of to reject the biblical God. The first one is my pride. My pride dictates that nobody is going to tell me how to live my life.
That's not a good reason to reject the biblical God. If the if you could demonstrate the biblical God was true, my pride would not be a valid reason to reject that.
Yep.
Stuart's not very good at this, I have to say. With decades of experience, I'm not impressed.
Stuart or Cliff?
Well, both, but Cliff is talking right now.
Yeah, no, Cliff is absolutely terrible. I find, you know, sort of his arguments seem to be based upon his wishes to believe this thing, because if it isn't true, then it's terrible.
Yeah.
And when he sort of says historical evidence and stuff, he never actually presents historical evidence. He presents the Bible, which he, you know, claims is a history book. It's not.
You'd think after all these years, he'd realize that's not actually effective. But I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe he does convince people this way. Enough people that it keeps his ministry funded.
Maybe.
My life. And I have a deep resentment towards anybody or anyone who wants to tell me how to live my life. But I've got to get over that pride, and I've got to be willing to face reality. And if reality is that God really exists, it would be wise for me to listen to God and not to have such a knee-jerk reaction that in my...
Cliff, are you able to get over your pride and arrogance of assuming you know the secrets of the universe that nobody else has been able to figure out? Can you get over that pride and accept reality?
But he's sort of coming from the stance of, well, I'm right, and you need to get over your pride and acknowledge that a God exists when I tell you that he exists. What he's not including is saying, hey, if God doesn't exist, I've got to get over my pride and acknowledge that a God does not exist. You know, he's not going down that route because he knows that he's right. He's so confident that he's right, that you know, it's kind of this really weird thing where you're sort of going, well, I know I'm right. You need to come across and drop your position because I'm right. Well, then demonstrate you're right. Don't just say, hey, I'm right because I'm right, because I'm right, because I'm right, because I'm right. And I didn't see any evidence or any kind of demonstration that your God exists in there. What I heard was a bunch of arguments, probably not secured in that, you know, good a foundation to begin with. You know, things like the transcendental argument. Oh, well, morality, if there's no God, there's no ultimate justice coming. Then there's no ultimate justice coming. That's a argument from consequence. It's not a good argument.
Yeah.
So I don't, you know, I didn't see Cliff present anything at all. All of this is preaching, and that's what annoys me about Cliff. At least Stuart tried to present some arguments. Cliff has just preached, just said, hey, it's true, because the Bible is historical, because it says it's true, it's true. That's basically what he's done. I see nothing there to convince anybody of the truth of your claims. I've just heard the claims.
And you know, if I have more claims than you, I win. Austin Sims, hello Austin.
Yeah.
Says,
hey, Austin.
If a god can be hurt or killed, they're still just a mortal, albeit a very powerful one. And that reminds me of a thing that I used to have a button for before my computer died and all my programming goodies were erased, and I haven't had time to rebuild them. But I do still have the clip, and I wanna share it with y'all now because I enjoy this one, and it's been a while.
Have emerged from an egg in a place where there was nothing. Then it shaped the world.
Yeah, and the lions would destroy it.
You can't just say
God
you
isn't
can't
as
just say
powerful
that.
The people killed Jesus, Schlatt.
I cannot believe you just said that.
He got crucified.
You're bringing up the crucifixion of Jesus Christ in a debate about.
You think God is this? Oh, no one can kill God.
What happened to him? What happened to him 3 days later?
He ran away like a little bitch.
He came back to life.
He ran away back up to God. Wham, wham. I couldn't fight the humans.
They sent floods. They sent pestilence. They sent locusts.
Well, we're still here. Where's God?
You can fuck up every human if you're a god. If you're
Where's
God,
Schlatt? The humans are here. Where's God? He's still scared.
He's not scared. God is not scared.
Yes.
You should be scared of back soon. You ever heard of the rapture?
Define the rapture.
It's when God is going to come back and judge the living and the dead.
When's he coming back?
Some people say soon.
How long have they been saying soon?
Thousands of years, maybe. I don't know. It's been Earth has been around for a while.
Well, the lions are only.
And they go back to talking about Pokemon after that, but it just tickles me. It's like he ran away like a little bitch, and he's still scared. Here we are. Where's this fucker?
Yeah, and sort of the mental gymnastics that has to come around that, like, God put himself in human form so that human form could suffer, kind of thing. So that's why he was able to be killed, because he wanted it, kind of thing. It's kind of like that when you see children and it's like, playing tag and one gets tagged and the other one goes, well, I wanted you to tag me. Ha ha ha. Is sort of like Jesus wanted you to kill him so he could forgive you for killing him. It's okay.
It's all part of the plan.
It would have been really a lot more impressive if he was on the cross and exploded with a Kamehameha and like totaled everybody. But sure, I guess
right? Like God couldn't save Jesus. Like, oh, he brought him back from the dead. He had all these powers, and he couldn't like levitate himself off the cross and then cause the cross to light up like a burning bush and be like, listen, bitches.
Come on, Ember, that only works on water. Come on now, you know that. But come on.
God too has to obey the magical physics.
Right. It's sort of, to me, it seems like this. And the fact that the apostles didn't recognize Jesus after he came back, right? It seemed like a completely different person. Well, perhaps it was a completely different person. And they're like, oh, but he had the marks of the crucifixion. Is Jesus the only person ever to be crucified? The guard was stationed there at the cross, so no one would rescue him. That suggests that people have been rescued from crucifixion, because you only have to implement something to stop people from doing it when they're doing it. So, I can't demonstrate that's the case. I'm just saying, like, it's all very strange that this all-powerful God is so hampered that he can't have Jesus come back as the same person. It's got to be a different person. He can't do any miracles of saving him or showing to people. He has to rely on the body actually being carried into the tomb or whatever before doing this thing where nobody can see it. It just seems ridiculous.
I think Jin may have solved it.
Oh,
iron.
Excellent.
Iron nails. Remember, Yahweh is weak against iron, especially in chariot form, but possibly nails too. Yeah.
Maybe the nails were chariot shaped. That's the problem there.
Ooh.
Yeah.
He is like a Pokemon, isn't he? He's weak against Earth.
Earth and metal, yeah.
My arrogance and pride, I cannot obey him. I must be king. I must be God of my life. And it's that pride that I understand, because I struggle with it, that I'm afraid is the primary reason that people are atheists or agnostic. And it's the primary reason that I, as a follower of Christ, struggle with doubt. I struggle with obedience to Christ, because I think I have a better way. And then, of course, there's a problem of evil.
I mean, you could very well have a better way, because a lot of the things in the magic book of talking donkeys are kind of stupid. Just a tiny note. Now, Cliff doesn't strike me as especially bright, but stop clock twice a day. He could be right about some things. Yeah.
And some of my atheist friends say, yeah, that's really why I can't accept the biblical God, because the problem of evil. Friends, if there is no God, there is no problem of evil. There's no problem of good. There just is. Everything just is. And it's all relative. It's all subjective. And to talk about an axiomatic morality is not acceptable for me, because it's essentially moral relativism. It depends who you trust to define what's axiomatic in morality and what's not. So it's either moral relativism, or there is some type of objective morality, because there's a mind that creates and defines that morality long before this human mind.
There is a mind that creates and defines morality. It's your mind.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
again, this is a argument from consequence. It's like, well, if God doesn't exist and morality is relative, then it's up to the person who is deciding on what they ought to do and ought not to do. That is morality. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why having a system of morality is so important, because there is no big, big imaginary guy to come down and tell you what it means. We have to do it ourselves. It's like saying, if there is no, fundamental lawmaker, then laws are just things that we've made up in order for societies to work. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
It's interesting that there isn't really a description of how to build a civilization in this thing, which you would think if that's the point of it, it would be in there. What it does tell us about what laws should be in place to construct a civilization include features like no shellfish, death if you pick up a stick on a Saturday, and how to do the slavery. The super moral top priorities.
Oh, and also, how to beat your kids if they don't listen to you, or kill them if they're bad enough. A whole range of laws. Things like if you wear mixed fabric, how to breed livestock with stripes, which is hilarious in there. Because in order to breed livestock with stripes, you make them look at striped wood, and that will get you livestock with stripes. Didn't you know? Yeah.
I mean, there's no way we could ever test the veracity of that claim.
Right. Yeah.
We'll just have to take the book's word for it.
Mind ever existed. When I look at Jesus Christ examining the human dilemma, we're all created in the image of God. We all have a whiff of glory, a scent of glory in us. But we also all have a real fascination with evil that comes from our pride. It comes from our feeling it's necessary to be number one. And when you begin to grapple with, we all have a whiff of wretchedness in us, but we all have a whiff of glory in us. We're created in the image of God. And the image of God is crucial. It's one of the most important ideas that the Bible communicates, that we all have intrinsic innate value and dignity, because we all are created to reflect the character, the goodness, the justice, the integrity, the compassion, the forgiveness, the love of the God who's been eternally existing.
That's not what that says, though. It says that Adam vaguely looks kind of like Yahweh. That's all that says. You can project all your favorite thoughts and feelings into it, but what it actually says is that Adam looks like Yahweh, and Adam's descendants carry that vague semblance. It doesn't mean all of us. It means the descendants of Adam. Now, I understand that for many evangelical Christians like Cliff, those things are synonymous, but there's many other variations of Christianity and even Judaism before it where that's not the case, where the thing that makes the Hebrews special is they are the descendants of Adam and the other people are not. But details.
Shouldn't everyone be descendants of Adam?
Well, that's sort of the thing, is that there's versions of the Eden story that are dominant today, but haven't always been, that say Adam was the only human because he was created by Yahweh. But if you go back further to where the Hebrew story is clearly polytheistic, the world is created by all the gods together, and then Yahweh goes apart and creates Adam. The Eve thing happens, the Cain and Abel thing happens, and so forth. And then the children of Adam and Eve go forth and take wives among the other people, because all the other gods made people of their own too. And that's what makes the Hebrew special, is they're the people of Yahweh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where the other people?
It was very real and very personal.
Yeah. I learned about that from an old article by Oberon Zell that was published in Green Egg magazine back in the 70s. It called The Other People. When preachers come to his house, he basically says what I just said and say, see, I don't have original sin because I'm from the other people. Notice my very European complexion. I'm clearly not of Middle Eastern descent.
Yeah.
Today. So that is why I follow Jesus Christ, not because I can prove him, but because he is the most reasonable, the most plausible option that we have before us as thinking human beings.
Well, asserting that he's reasonable and plausible, fantastic. But can you demonstrate that? Saying it isn't showing it.
Thank you very much for that opening. Folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, Dr. James Coons. I want to let you know our vision is to provide a neutral platform so that everybody has their chance to make their case on a level playing field. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for many upcoming debates. And with that, Alex and Phil, thrilled to have you here as well. We will have Phil going first. The floor is all yours, Phil.
So I'd like to thank Stuart, Cliff, James, and Alex for this event. And I'll start with an argument I published in the International Journal for Philosophy of Religion called The Expanded Problem of Animal Suffering. Now, we all know the standard problem of suffering. If God is all powerful, he could prevent suffering. If he's all good, he should want to. So why is there suffering? Now, one traditional answer from Christians is that suffering came into the world because of human sin. And indeed, that's what Cliff frequently appeals to. However, science has discovered that animals have been suffering for hundreds of millions of years before humans ever existed, which strongly undermines this key Christian argument. Science has also revealed that the very engine of our creation involves mass extinctions and the brutality of evolution. Why would God choose
that's a good point.
violent process?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Why make animals suffer at all then?
Yeah,
isn't that
not
punishing...
responsible for sin? They can't be redeemed. Yeah. Like what's the deal?
Right.
I was slightly distracted, because we have. I was considering just ignoring this because I have a hunch where this chatter's going. Ravioli Boy says, "Can you demonstrate?" I think he means Pontius Pilate existed, and there's two things. The first, there is evidence for Pontius Pilate. A few years ago, possibly decades ago at this point, they found his tomb. So we can show a grave that's marked with his name. That's great. There's also coins with his picture on it. So shit like that, whatever. So there is some evidence he existed. Right. But the more important thing is who cares? No one is basing their entire religion on whether this man existed.
Right, right.
And there's no concept. Nobody's telling everybody else how to live their lives based on whether this dude existed. It's not, it's a historical curiosity at best, you know?
Well, it's not really even a curiosity because we found coins in Judea with his image carved upon it and referencing Pontius Pilate. So that was his name, his family name, because here's the thing, the Romans kept very good census records, right? Their censuses, it's where we get the word census from. They did a tally of who was living where they were living and who they were to tally up what resources they would need for an empire. This is integral to any large civilization because you've got to know where to divert resources to. And the Romans were very smart in this. We have his family in the census from Rome, right? You know who we don't have in the census? Jesus. That's who we don't have. Now, the censuses, records have been lost, all that kind of thing, acknowledge that completely. But comparing the two is not equivalent because we have the Pilate family in the census, but we don't have Jesus' family. And that brings up one of the reasons why the New Testament is incredibly flawed. It's because when doing their census, the Romans did not require people to travel to where they were born. That is absolutely ridiculous because if you are running an empire and you want to send resources to where they are needed, you need to know where people are, not where they were. So there is absolutely no reason why they would request such a thing and a lot of reasons why they absolutely wouldn't. That is not done. There's no record of it. The only place that says it happened is the Bible, and it makes no sense whatsoever. So this claim that Mary and Joseph were returning to the place where they were born for the census makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it is much more likely that Christians needed to have Jesus be born in Bethlehem because that's what the Jewish prophecy said. So they had have a reason why Jesus, who we know for the early part of his life lived in Nazareth, right? Jesus of Nazareth, there's no doubt about it that he originated from Nazareth, was in fact born in Bethlehem, which isn't the same place. So they were traveling to make a census for some reason. It makes zero sense whatsoever. Apart from that, apart from the coins, the documents about his family, we have records, slate carvings of Pontius Pilate. There's a ton of records of Pontius Pilate. So this is not an equivalency. And as Ember said, he wasn't claimed to have risen from the dead. Like, you could show that Jesus existed all you want. Just say you found him in the census. Sure, you found a Jesus in the census. You found that his family existed, etc., etc. That's not the important point. The important point is whether he rose from the dead. Without that, Christianity is futile. So show that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I have many thoughts, but once again, I'm slightly distracted. Ravioli Boy also says the Megiddo mosaic. Now, I wasn't familiar with that, so I Googled it quick, like as one does, and apparently there's this cool mosaic that they found in Megiddo that shows Christians were worshiping in the 2nd century ish.
Okay,
that's cool.
Well,
you know, I mean, there's fishes, there's art, there's it appears to be.
The 2nd century, letters. We know there were Christians in the 2nd century.
Yeah.
Why would that be?
But also Nazareth. Yes, Jesus of Nazareth. Where's Nazareth? Nobody knows. The city didn't exist. So that's a fun thing. Where's the empty tomb?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody knows.
There's a couple minor details missing in this story here.
To get to us. And why does he command and commit cruelty to animals? In Deuteronomy, God orders.
Okay, so can I just point out the inscription on the Megiddo mosaic?
Sure.
The Greek inscription reads, "The God-loving Akeptos has offered the table to God Jesus Christ as a memorial." Does that mean there's two gods?
I don't know what the
God-loving Akeptos. Yeah. So it's somebody called Akeptos donated that table. So bought that inscription.
Oh, it's sponsored
as a donation
content
to the church. Yeah, it's sponsored content.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yay, capitalism. Christianity has always been about the money. Now we have proof. Yeah. Hooray. Oh, goodness. Jen says Nazareth is a rock band out of Scotland. We've solved it. Jen is just solving all these things. Iron Nails, rock band from Scotland. Good stuff. Love to see it. No. This is why we do lives, because y'all are just full of tons of cool information, and I love it.
Worshipping a different god to be put to the sword, but not just the people, but also their animals. The same for the Amalekites. God orders their destruction, including their animals. God drowned almost all the animals in the world, including puppies and kittens, because of human sin. In the 10 plagues, as well as killing all the firstborn Egyptian domestic animals, he turns the Nile into blood and all the fish drown. Jesus exorcises demons into a herd of 2,000 pigs who then run off a cliff and drown. It seems the biblical God loves drowning innocent animals. Now, right now, there is an extinction event at the hands of humans. It's primarily because we eat meat. Now, God could foresee this tragedy and tweak our diets to avoid it, but he didn't. Why not? Now, these issues are easily resolved if the biblical God is false. Then it's no surprise that both the Bible and nature are so cruel to animals. Now, theists sometimes reply to this by running the moral argument, but this depends on trusting our moral intuitions. And if we can do that, then we should reject the cruel biblical God. And if we can't, then the moral argument fails. Either way, God fails. Now, the cosmology of the Bible is another clue to God's fictitious nature. It describes the sky as having a solid dome called the firmament. And we have good reasons to think the authors believe this. The Hebrew word rakeh used implies it, surrounding cultures believed it, and the Bible describes it as holding up the waters above and being firm as a mirror of cast metal. Talmudic rabbis debated how thick it was, and Christian thinkers from Augustine to Martin Luther all agreed it was solid. But if we know there is no firmament, Genesis also describes primordial waters, plants and grasses. existing before stars were created. Yet science tells us the stars came first. And of course, humans are described as being made through special creation rather than evolution. If the biblical God is a human invention, then all these mistakes are unsurprising. But if he's
Ember, Davian is saying that it's kind of hard to hear. Is there any way we can throw the sound up a bit?
That's as high as it goes in the player. Let me see.
Do you have a booster of some sort? Like maybe we can boost it a little bit.
I don't know how to boost the audio inside StreamYard. I can boost my own personal audio.
Yeah, but that's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
maybe you can use the same technique to edit the screen share and try and boost the volume that way.
Well, I can't get into the settings for that the same way I can for my own settings.
Yeah.
We could try watching it directly on YouTube.
That might be an idea, sure. I mean, I know that James makes his content common common thing. He doesn't in any way copyright his content. Creative Commons is what I'm thinking of. It's Creative Commons, or it should be in there, because that's what James does, which I respect, to be honest with you. I respect someone that does make it Creative Commons. Sure.
Yeah. We've both done debates on Modern Day Debate. In fact, we did one together. A while back. It was October 2023.
That was
it was.
Wasn't that the Flat Earth one? That was so much fun.
Yeah, we got so much good stuff out of that. We for one thing, we stumped a couple of flat earthers on how the fuck eclipses happen, but also we got Flatzoid we drilled down and drilled down and drilled down until Flatzoid admitted that he believes flat earth because he believes the Bible. And that's the only reason. And so that's fun too. But we learned in that experience and other experiences working with MDD that James is all for sharing his content because it promotes what he does. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I found we're a couple of seconds off, but it's close. And hopefully it'll be louder this way. Maybe.
Yep.
Let me get us on. Okay, playback speed is set correctly. Okay, let's go. Maybe.
At the University of Chicago Press, the Big Bang was thought to be the beginning of time, but this is no longer so. So Stu's just out of date on science here. So I can unpack this in the dialogue, or you can read the book when it comes out in the spring. But in a new survey that we're about to publish, physicists overwhelmingly rejected the notion that the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. But even if the universe had a big bang, there is reason to think it must have a cause, as Cliff has argued. After all, Christians say that God doesn't need a cause, often because they allege he existed timelessly and then entered into time. So he has no beginning and thus requires no cause. But why can't the universe do the same? For example, the Hartle-Hawking model or holographic cosmology imply an initial timeless state. And we have good reasons to take these ideas seriously, unlike Genesis, which we know is wrong. Now,
even if we're setting aside the astrophysics, which is my fucking favorite thing, but even setting that aside, just on a purely logic and reason basis, if you can special plead for God, then we can special plead exactly the same way for the universe. If you want to hold the universe to a specific standard, it must have a creator, it must have a prime mover, then the same thing must apply to God.
Yes. And here's the thing, it drives me crazy when people say, oh, the Big Bang was the start of the universe. No, it wasn't. It was the start of the expansion period. Like no physicist is actually saying, hey, the Big Bang was the start. It's just the earliest we can go back. And they say, well, what was before the Big Bang? And it's like, well, now you're talking about what was before time. That may be a completely nonsensical question to ask. That is a category error. Because you're sort of saying, hey, what was the time frame before there were time frames?
Yeah, in fact, there's a few hypotheses moving forward in both in astrophysics and in quantum physics, kind of asymptotically approaching the same conclusion from different directions that strongly indicate there may not have ever been a Big Bang, because that's an extrapolation on our part. We're looking at what's happening now and what we can observe in the distant past in far off galaxies and drawing a trend line. And that trend line leads us back towards a singularity. But that isn't necessarily actually true. But that's a whole other topic. The point is there may not have actually been a Big Bang. That's just an inference on the expanding universe model that we use because it makes such tremendously accurate predictions.
Another argument Stuart has used is the fine-tuning of the constant of nature. He said that the chances of life-emitting values are incomprehensible. Well, that's right. And that's why fine-tuning fails. These are probabilities that we don't know. To run that argument, you need to assume the constants could be different from what they are. But there's no evidence for that. We have to assume that without God, the constants would be selected randomly and only once. We've got no evidence for that either. We have to assume God would select life-emitting constants. But since he can make life in any conceivable universe, then our universe looks even less likely with God than without. Stuart also said that the multiverse, which undermines fine-tuning, does not have a shred of evidence for it. I disagree. Inflationary cosmology seems to predict it. Weinberg predicted dark energy using it. Arguably, a Darwinian model did the same. So in surveys, both philosophers and physicists overwhelmingly reject the fine-tuning argument. To sum up, arguments for God, like fine-tuning, the moral argument, the cosmological argument, they don't work. But arguments against God, like the expanded problem of animal suffering, like the clear errors of the Bible, do work. So we should reject the biblical God. Thanks.
Now, notice the stark difference. Phil makes a case on his own and also refutes common arguments from the other side, as opposed to Cliff and Stuart, who are just like, well, I really wish it were true, though. Don't you? Don't you wish it were true?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll shuffle it over to Alex for this remaining 7 minutes. Oh, I think it's on mute. Let me just...
I've got it.
There you go.
Does the biblical God exist? My knee-jerk response is, I hope so. It does, of course, promise eternal life and concrete moral purpose. Unfortunately, my investigations thus far have run decidedly cold. Why is that? Well, tonight we are discussing the existence of the biblical God. I'm tempted to dismiss the motion out of hand on the grounds of a principle from formal logic known as ex falso quod libet, from the false anything, a principle which states that from a contradiction, anything follows. The Bible is contradictory on a number of grounds. Not only does it present two characters, Jesus and Yahweh, as far apart in temperament as possible to imagine, only for Christians to expect us to believe that they are in fact one character, God, perfectly united in essence and desire, but it also does so in a series of books which contain too many textual contradictions to even scratch the surface of in our allotted time. The Gospels are a mine of contradictions, recording decades after the events in Greek the behaviors and sayings of the Aramaic-speaking Jesus, who is said to fulfill Hebrew prophecies which sometimes, such as in the case of Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, he shall be called a Nazarene, do not even exist in the Old Testament. So I have some questions for Cliff and Stuart this evening, and it's good to see you both again. I so much enjoyed our conversation. I'm glad to do this in the context of now a debate. Here are my questions. What day did Jesus die? The Synoptic Gospels say that he died on the Passover. John's Gospel said he died the day before. What time was Jesus crucified? Mark's Gospel has it at 9 in the morning. In John, Jesus is still stood before Pilate at noon. Did Jesus carry his cross the whole way, or did Simon of Cyrene help him out? Depends which Gospel you read. Cliff mentioned that when Jesus was crucified, there were two thieves either side of him.
So I brought
Jesus
that up, and I basically got the answer because one says it happened before Passover, and one says that it happened after the Passover feast. Now, somebody I trust for biblical knowledge, because they said, hey, it's during Passover kind of thing, and one was after the feast, but Passover hasn't ended. But apparently that's not how Passover worked back then. It was just the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So that fails as an excuse, basically. And I didn't know that in my debate at the time. I wish I had, but, you know, we learn these things as we go along, that excuse doesn't actually fly. And so Alex is quite right. One says that it was before the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They had not yet feasted, and one was basically after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which both of those things cannot be true. I didn't know about the time one. That's interesting. I'll look that one up.
There's a bunch of cool things. I love how he just whips out a bunch of the, well, is it this or is it this? Is it this or is it this? Yeah. It just, I mean, it feels like a cheap shot, but holy shit, it's effective. And I enjoy it because it's fun. And incidentally, I do keep references over on my website, betterthanember.com. I don't have as many for refuting apologetics because I only recently started collecting them, and I haven't gone back through my old stuff to collect all the other references I've mentioned. But one that I do have is what I'm dropping in the chat right now. It's lyingforjesus.org. It's a list of all the Bible contradictions. And if you click on any specific contradiction, it'll bring up the passages in question and show you how they conflict. It's fantastic. I love it. It's awesome. It's just so much fun. Yeah. So yeah, that's why that link is preserved on the website in case you forget to save it to your bookmarks bar today.
The other of whom jumps to his defense. A very moving story. Of course, that's what happens in the Gospel of Luke. But in the Gospels of Mark and the Gospel of Matthew, both of the thieves next to Jesus mock him on the cross. So which is it? John doesn't mention it at all. But do both of the thieves mock him, or does one come to his defense? Again, it depends which gospel you read. Did the temple curtain rip before Jesus died, as in Luke, or after, as in Mark and Matthew? What does Jesus say when he dies? In Mark and Matthew, he says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Again, by the way, distancing himself from God and appearing to present himself as a separate being. In Luke, he quotes a different psalm, saying, into your hands I commend my spirit. In John, he simply says, it is finished. Reconcilable, perhaps, but is it a coincidence that the earlier the gospel, the more Jesus separates himself from God? Those are actual questions, by the way. And every single one of the contradictions that I've just mentioned is just about the death of Jesus. We still have the resurrection accounts and the birth narratives, for example, not to mention the general increasing divinity of Jesus in later and later gospels, telling me that the historical Jesus didn't even claim to be God in the first place. Not only this, but Phil's already mentioned the problem of animal suffering. It's worth reflecting that the problem of evil has a number of well thought out responses called theodicies. Evil exists because of higher order goods that can only be attainable if there's some kind of suffering in the world. Free will means that we need to be able to commit free evil acts. Evil helps our souls to develop and grow closer to God, this kind of stuff.
That doesn't help with natural evils. That doesn't help. The free will argument, like I've run into that one, and the person opposite of me had got a great surprise when I said, well, what about malaria and all of these viruses and things? We have a problem there. Like, what kind of free will is involved when a baby gets malaria and dies? Do mosquitoes get free will as well? I don't know. Explain that to me.
I mean, they might, but I also find it so fascinating that there's such a necessity to come up with excuses and post hoc rationalizations to cover over all these problems that they have their own special name, theodicies, and they are exactly what they sound like. It's a portmanteau. It's not really, but it sounds like it is, and it's an accurate description. Theology, idiocy, theodicy. Hooray! We did. It's a Dora Explorer, the thing. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But you need a whole category with a special name because there are so many problems with the story. Wild.
That none of them are effective in explaining the existence of non-human animal suffering. Animals do not make free moral decisions. They do not have moral souls that can develop through strife. It's controversial even to suggest that they'll simply be compensated in some kind of fluffy afterlife. I want to hear today a direct answer. How can the suffering of a deer on its own in a forest, with its leg broken and trapped under a tree, already starving in confused agony, before being predated upon by having a mountain lion clasp the deer's windpipe in its jaw for an excruciating minutes-long death, be explained if supervised by an omnipotent invigilator who, if for some reason could not prevent this particular event, seemingly could have at least designed the machinery of the natural world to be less prone to this kind of thing? Another question. Why is a person's geographical place of birth a statistically reliable indicator of how likely they are to be saved? This is Stephen Mason's argument. The populace of Connecticut is around 70% Christian, let alone theistic, whereas the populace of Thailand is 95% Buddhist, and therefore at best 5% theistic. I'm told by St. Paul in Romans that, quote, what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse.
One of my favorite verses, not my favorite one anymore, because there's so many good ones to choose from. Right now, I'm loving Exodus 24. No, Exodus 16, 20. I forget the exact verse, but it's the one where God looks upon the flood and regrets it. Wait, that'd be in Exodus 6, wouldn't it? Whatever. God regrets. An all-knowing, all-powerful being regrets. Neat trick, that. But this verse is definitely on my top 10 list because his invisible attributes are clearly seen. This is a perfectly coherent narrative, folks.
Apparently so.
Yes.
Why then should I expect this God to provide more compelling evidence to those in New England than to those in Southeast Asia? Or are the Thai just orders of magnitude more naturally incredulous? And if so, why? How lucky Cliff and Stuart must feel to reside in a stronghold of the one true religion, given just how much variance there is out in the world. Again, why is a person's geographical place of birth a reliable statistical indicator of how likely they are to be saved? On our hypothesis of atheism, religion is a product not of divine revelation, but of evolved local mythologies and customs, married to political influence and military conquest. Religious beliefs varying by region and culture in a statistically and historically predictable manner, whilst a trouble for the propositions theology, is not only consistent with our worldview, but expected on it. The same is true of animal suffering. What would we expect to see if the world was being supervised by benevolence itself? And what do we find? Natural selection is the mechanism of animal development, which does not just involve, but relies upon death and destruction to the extent that 99.9% of the species, let alone the individual creatures that have ever existed on this planet, have been brutally wiped from existence in some of the most painful ways imaginable. Survival of the fittest.
Well, you know, God created all living things, and he's made a lot of mistakes, and he needed to etch a sketch a few times to clear away the air. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, he regretted doing it. It's like, oh, I regret killing all humans. And it's like, you're not a very confident dude for being omniscient and omnipotent there, buddy. Like, you're not very, you know, like, I wouldn't think that a perfect being would ever question what they did.
There's a bigger problem. Like, not only is he all-knowing, so he should know he would regret the thing before he did the thing, but he's all-powerful. If he regrets the thing, he should be able to undo it as easy as that.
Yes,
and he
absolutely.
can't. So,
right.
Yeah.
It is the same thing as death and anguish and suffering of the unfit. I think this is at least unexpected. If we assume naturalism, however, the world is just an
unrelated. How cool would it be if the Bible was a history of alternate timelines where God experienced regret and then changed history so that it happened a different way because of his regret? I think that would be a fun mythology.
Yeah.
Why is the world the way it is? God hasn't decided whether or not he regrets this iteration of time yet. Yeah.
Well, apparently he's going to, because he's going to rapture all of the chosen and destroy the world. So apparently he's going to. So, and I kind of, part of me goes, well, why should he bother with the whole song and dance of having all this suffering occur in the first place if he knows ahead of time who is worthy and who is not? And I think this is where Calvinists sit on more secure ground, because they say, hey, God knows in advance who he's going to choose and who he's not. And it's like, okay, but then why bother with all of this song and dance if you already know who's worthy and who's not? Just take them and let's not go through this entire nonsense, this absurdity that's life. I think it's way more, you know, it's a weird thing for God to know the outcome, yet still go through the process. Why?
Yeah, it's if you know who's going to win a chess match, why play? Maybe it's fun to play the game, I suppose. I mean, if you're an infinite being, what else have you got to do? But that rather invites another question. Why is it only Earth? If he could have made, I mean, he could have made an infinite flat Earth with infinite people on it, infinite pieces to play with. Or he could have made the universe much like it is, but with every world inhabitable and peopled with different kinds of people. Wouldn't it be fun to watch the humans interact with the Martians and the Venusians and things? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I just think a little bigger than Yahweh does. Who knows?
Well, most theists don't think there's anything outside of the Earth. There's only humans and no other intelligent life anywhere in the universe. I don't know if there is. I don't know if there isn't. I only, you know, we've only got a sample of one solar system, but you know, it's kind of weird to create the entire universe for the benefit of just humans on this one infinitely small speck, you know, like this tiny little speck on in the universe. I don't understand what, you know, why create all of that stuff?
For set decoration.
Well, I think it's where, you know, as much as it pains me, flat earthers do have a point with what they believe, because they believe that, you know, we've got a dome and then there's the firmament out there and there's nothing else out there kind of thing. No planets, no stars, nothing at all. It's just firmament and God's doing some crap somewhere, you know, like who knows? But that would make more sense if a God was real, right? That we wouldn't have this massive universe with planets and stars and stuff. But at the end of the day, we do. So you've got to explain why. And the explanation seems to be, well, God works in mysterious ways. You know, God just does stuff apparently. And you know, it's an excuse that you don't have a reason.
Mm-hmm. And that is another fun thing, because so many believers claim they have the ear of the Almighty. They not only speak directly to God, but God speaks directly to them. So why isn't God giving them answers to these questions? Why isn't God giving them stuff to prove the holy knowledge, like, say, the cure for cancer? I mean, I might not be convinced of a specific God if a dude walked into a hospital claiming to be a prophet and wrote down a chemical formula claiming it was a cure for cancer. We test it and it works. I would say that dude's got something cool going on, but I'd sure as hell listen a lot more closely to what else he has to say.
An amoral arena of accidentally existing organisms fighting in a blind struggle for survival in a world of limited resources. Again, we do not just explain the reality of the world, we also come to expect it. So, an unreliable source pointing to a fragmented God who, despite being the essence of benevolence, designs and consistently oversees systems of untold suffering and sometimes commands its infliction directly himself. The very moral intuition that Cliff and Stuart are relying upon to make a case for God's existence, well, you know that certain things are right or wrong. You know that's not just a matter of opinion, are the very moral intuitions that we're invited to discard with when faced with basically anything that the God of the Old Testament does. Does the biblical God exist? I don't even know what biblical God we're talking about. Which one?
Thank you very much for that opening as well. We are going to jump into the open dialogue. Want to give you a couple of heads up.
Yeah.
That is he's playing the meta game right now. Like, yeah, the subject is the God of the Bible real, but there are multiple gods of the Bible and they have very, very different attributes to them. You know, refer to, as we mentioned earlier, you know, God can't stop you if you're in an iron chariot kind of thing. You know, like that's a very different God to the one that Cliff and Stuart believe in, that can do anything he wants. You know, it's
yeah, there's the God who wandered around Eden and Adam and Eve were able to hide from. There's the God who floated around in the Ark of the Covenant and led the Israelites through the desert and smote them when they got sick of manna and shit. There's El, there's Yahweh, there's Baal, there's fucking Asherah. There's this whole section in Genesis where the creator of Eden is talking to other beings and referring to them as we. There's a lot of gods in this book.
Yeah.
Folks, we are going to have not only open dialogue, but the Q&A following that. If you happen to have a question, feel free to submit it in the old live chat here at Modern Day Debate, tagging me with Modern Day Debate. And if you want, you can also put in a super chat question, which will push your question to the top of the list. Last but not least, Alex will have to depart possibly mid Q&A, depending on how many questions we have. So I do want to let you know that that's a possibility just for his travel, but we're going to jump into the open dialogue.
Should be okay.
You got it. Let me know whenever you have to, and we'll make it work. But gentlemen, the floor is all yours for open dialogue.
All right, I'll start. First of all, Phil, I don't know where he's getting his philosophy of religion and his statistics, but just to keep him honest for a second, check out Nature Magazine, a highly secular, atheistic journal magazine, I would call it, over here. And over 40% of Harvard med school professors and Harvard philosophers at large, teachers, say that there is a personal biblical God. Over 40% are then agnostic and say that they are not sure. So the highest level of thinking, at least here in the US, you know, Oxford and Cambridge could be higher, but I'm dubious. And they outright say, the majority say that there is a biblical God that exists. A very
point of order, 40% is not a majority.
That is not a majority at all.
It's also worth noting, Harvard kind of famously also has seminary stuff and started as a religious college, as many colleges did. And it kind of follows that their philosophy division would still have some theistic elements to it. Not that that's super relevant to anything. I mean, if you're going to cite this specific group, if you're going to cherry pick this specific group of Harvard scholars, why don't we look at the other groups of Harvard scholars, like the physicists, the evolutionary biologists, and so forth, who have some of the lowest ratings of personal belief in a singular religion of any group anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why is Stewart singling out this one group? And 40% is the best he can get?
It's like an appeal to authority. Like he's trying to use the name of, Harvard grad, Harvard is this name that it's an Ivy League school. So he's trying to associate belief with this Ivy League school, even if it was a majority, which, as you pointed out, it is not. Just because it's Harvard doesn't make it any more significant kind of thing. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Oh, Jeffrey raises an interesting point. I know there's a conversation going on in the chat that I'm not covering on stream because it's long and involved and tangential. I do love my tangents, but we do have a debate to cover. However, he mentions not being all benevolent and does not imply evil, etc., etc. I would remind our viewers that according to this book, the book from which the mythology of this god comes from, he creates evil. I make all things light and dark. I
was just about to type that.
Yeah, that whole thing. He says he creates evil, or at least the person who claims to write for him says that he
it's Isaiah
evil.
45. Isaiah 45.
That's it. So, I mean, how do you be all benevolent or even benevolent, just regular flavor benevolent, but also deliberately create evil? It's a curious thing.
Pretty small percentage are atheists. They're atheists. Maybe that's largely because they're scared, because so many people think that they're snobbish and they're arrogant. Atheists, that is. But I believe it's based off of evidence that all these Harvard professors at Harvard Med and undergrad have come to. So that's Nature magazine. That's not Christianity.
You believe that it's evidence. Is it also evidence that the agnostics are agnostic and the atheists are atheist? And also, technically speaking, everyone is agnostic because we can't know for sure there is no God, just like Stewart can't know for sure there is one. That's why he keeps saying, I believe, and he can't just demonstrate his claim. We're all agnostic, and therefore it's a useless term.
Today, it's no Christian magazine or type of literature. That's your literature, my friend. So that's where I would start. And secondly, why then is almost 70% of atheists white male? Why are all the largest conferences held around the world always white male? Usually only one country presented, and that's your country. Bring somebody along who is white. All the others are white as well. Usually one of a different ethnicity is represented. So talk about a construct. David Hume had an incredible influence here.
Why is it that the majority of people in India are Hindu? Why is it that the majority of people in Persia are Muslims?
Yeah, but I'm wondering if this is a rebuttal or this is an open discussion, because if it's an open discussion, like Stewart's just going on and on and on. I would rather a bit of more back and forth, and sort of discuss these ideas of what he's talking about. Like, is it a rebuttal period? Maybe I'm not 100% sure.
James did say
as you said,
open discourse.
Oh, he did. Okay.
However, remember, Alex has been criticized more than once for being overly charitable and letting his opponents say everything they want to say. And I don't know Phil well enough to say, but he does sound British, so he may have the same vibe.
Oh, you us colonies. Look, I think that there is a method to that madness. If you do let somebody go on and on, it's that you can then, when they gish gallop and do 10 million points, you can rebut 10 million points. And as long as you get the time to do so, and that's important, that you do actually get the time to do that. So there's a good reason to let someone go on and on if what you're intending to do is do a mass counter to everything that they've laid out there. And that can be really, really strong. So I'm not going to say that's the wrong thing to do or something I wouldn't do, because I've let people do that as well. But I've absolutely been emphatic that I get the time to address everything that they've gone through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really fun. But you've got to take notes. That's one of Mark's most frequent tips. Take notes. Shoot, there was something else. It'll probably come to me later.
When it came to the miraculous and denying the miraculous, I think he's an idiot. But talk about a construct. Talk about those who, if Alex is going to make the point of the genetic fallacy point, and if he's just going to say whether it's in Myanmar or the U.S., just because someone has greater exposure to the biblical God doesn't mean they have somehow a better chance at accepting him. I have a 75% chance of rejecting the biblical God because this guy is, by the way, my dad. 75% of pastors' kids reject God and never come back to believing him.
So citation needed.
That's a solid quarter that's going to stay there. I mean, if you have odds of 25%, it's not unreasonable to have, to be talking to somebody. What are you talking about? You're like statistics say 75% of the time they're not religious, so I can't possibly be religious. What are you talking about? 25% is not that bad odds. It's not great, but it's not that bad. What? This isn't an argument.
Oh my. Yeah, and again, citation needed. I'm trying to look up where he's finding it. I'm finding references from the Barna Group, which is a think tank that supports evangelical religious-based education and leadership. And according to them, a couple different studies. One says that 1/3 of pastors say that their child is no longer actively involved in the church. That doesn't mean they don't believe, they just don't go to church. That's 1/3, not 3/4. And according to another study, 40% of pastors say their child age 15 or older went through a period of doubt about their faith.
Okay,
not that they're atheists.
The only thing I have found about this is from gotquestions.org, which is their own thing, and their reference to them walking away isn't to any kind of study. No, it's back to their own website. So if you're not aware, Cliff and Stuart are gotquestions.org. So they seem to be taking their information from themselves. I don't know where they got this information from. No idea.
It's a whole different level of self-referential.
In him. Okay, so Alex's stats and his thinking are a little dicey at the very least. So just because you have been given evidence through your culture, by no means, does that mean you are more likely to accept this God and have eternal life. Secondly, the teleological argument, Phil, is way off as well. I didn't even bring up the teleological argument. Maybe you did, but he's wrong on that as well. I think you got to get to know your partner a little bit better there. Alex, I saw him talking to Richard Dawkins not too long ago briefly. I caught a couple snippets, and oddly enough, it was on the teleological argument and free will. And Dawkins now calls himself a cultural Christian, and he says, I have no idea what to do with the teleological argument because it is so convincing that potentially there is a God. And he said that
no. That is absolutely a misrepresentation of what he said. And we know because we watched Dawkins talk about it when he was talking to Jordan Peterson, right? They say, oh, he's a cultural Christian now. He's saying he's a Christian. No, he's saying he is, like he made this absolutely clear. He was raised in a society that is filled with Christianity. So culturally, he is a Christian kind of thing. He comes from a Christian culture. That doesn't mean to say that he believes in Christianity or God or anything of the sort. He's just acknowledging that our culture has a Christian background. That's all, which is true and fact and demonstrable. And when he said, what was the other claim that he made? That he doesn't know what to do with the teleological argument. Okay, if you're uncertain, that's the argument from fine-tuning. What he said, which is what I've said, is that the fine-tuning argument is probably the best one they have, right? That is probably their strongest argument. That doesn't mean to say it's a good argument. It's just the rest are terrible, right? The rest are absolutely horrible. So he's basically saying, hey, that's the one I think is the strongest. And then the Christians have gone out and says, well, he says that can't be resolved. No, absolutely not. He said nothing of the sort. He just said that's probably their strongest one. That's all. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Hawking said something, wrote something similar several books back before his passing, where he said all the arguments are terrible, but if I were to pick the most convincing, like 1 out of 100 instead of 0 out of 100, it would be the fine tuning, because the universe does have discrete properties. We don't know that they're tuned. We don't know they could be any other way. And then he goes on to spend pages and pages describing how most of the properties of the universe are dependent on other properties of the universe. And it could ultimately boil down to a single thing. And everything else is an entailment of that. So it's really like rolling a single die with an unknown number of sides. It may only have one side. It may have a gazillion. Who knows? But whatever value comes out determines all the constants of the universe. We don't know.
I just hate how he's just absolutely misrepresented what he said. Like, seriously, that is a straw man. That is a absolute misrepresentation of somebody. And I will call it out as dishonest right here. That is dishonest.
Absolutely.
Especially as he has just been in a discussion with Jordan Peterson, and explicitly explained what he meant by those 2 comments. Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
If you're going to cherry pick a quote and then you deliberately misrepresent the quote, you change what the person said, but still call it a quote, what else can you call it but lying? You know?
So to say that outright the teleological argument is laughable now, to say outright that somehow the universe having a beginning is laughable now, I just don't know who you're talking to. I'm talking to different people, I guess. So we'll have to have another sit down on that one and bring our stats and research. So those are big.
You didn't bring your stats and research?
Yeah, you didn't.
Today?
Yeah, I don't know why.
What did I expect? Ay.
Big pieces of evidence. Alex has also said to me before, I just need a revelation and then I'll believe in God. That's all I need. Just a revelation. That sounds exactly like Richard Dawkins. And what does Richard Dawkins say? Well, my revelation changes about every year. So his first one was, well, if the stars align and say, Richard, believe in me, I am God. Then I will believe in God.
Pardon my interruptions. I just want to be sure. Maybe this is the last point, and then we'll kick it back into that. You bet.
So I want to know what kind of revelation Alex wants, and what kind of revelation does he want the boy in Myanmar or wherever else to have in order to believe in God, for this God to be fair and morally good. Because Richard Dawkins switched and he said, you know what, actually, I need more than that, because I could be hallucinating in terms of those stars aligning. And I hear that from all the top atheists. Now, maybe Alex is talking about a different form of revelation. I want to be fair to him. But I see the consistency, the moving of the goalposts all the time.
So can I reply to that? First, about the Harvard Med people who had, what was it, did you say 40%?
Over 40%, yeah. Out of Nature magazine.
Okay. Right, Nature. Okay. But did you also read the article in Nature about leading scientists still reject God?
What year?
I can pick it up for you, but what they did was they surveyed scientists.
Notice the double standard. Stuart doesn't provide a year or an author.
No, he doesn't provide any kind of citation. Yeah.
But when Phil brings it up, you need to tell me the volume number.
Oh, absolutely. You need to actually justify what you're saying.
Yeah,
what, me?
No,
I don't have to.
It.
Yeah, no, yeah. And it's kind of pointless anyway, because it kind of is, well, who cares if people believe in this thing or not? Like, we want actual evidence for it, not whether people, like, it's kind of an ad populum kind of fallacy. And that's why we don't go, well, all these scientists don't believe in God. That's a good argument against God, because it doesn't matter what the scientists personally believe. It really doesn't. Okay, it matters what we can show through the scientific process, which is the most reliable way to demonstrate that something is true or not true, or the most reliable that we know of at the moment to demonstrate whether something is true or not true. Like, it doesn't matter if what they personally believe. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I wouldn't even get into that, what scientists believe personally. It's not a factor. But the real indicative thing is that we can't demonstrate scientifically in any way. There is not one paper that concludes there is a God. Like, there's not one peer reviewed. We cannot find any evidence whatsoever of a God.
Is a bit of a problem for a being who's supposedly not only obvious, but everywhere. Can't swing a cat in a crowded room without hitting all the God in here.
They also compared it to leading scientists. So these were members of the National Academy of Science. So for example, what we see in the United States is about 70, I think it's 74% last survey I saw of the general population believed in God. When you went to scientists, it went down to about 50%, similar to your 40%. But when you went to senior scientists, members of the National Academy, it went down to 7%. That is an enormous discrepancy between the overall population of the US, an enormous discrepancy. So now, quite frankly, though, it doesn't really matter how many scientists believe in God. This is just an argument. One, it's a cherry picking fallacy because you happen to pick, you know, people in the medical profession, which isn't really a profession. It really isn't a profession that's really relevant to issues regarding God. These would be topics like cosmology, evolutionary biology, things like that.
Medicine, he's right. Medicine, yeah. Medicine is just doctors, people that deal with disease and, you know, healing. That's not in any way connected to the origin of the universe or anything like it. Yeah, no, I gotcha.
Yeah, although it would be pretty neat if the doctors who have faith didn't have to do surgeries or administer drugs. They could just pray and people were healed. You know, like the Bible says Christians can do.
Yeah. And yet no Christians, no faith healers are working in hospitals. I wonder why. I wonder why.
Mysterious ways, Mark.
Yeah.
Where, and of course, whether God exists is a philosophical question. They disagree on almost everything. But one thing they actually do agree upon is that God doesn't exist. Something like 70% of professional philosophers do not believe in God, right? So you're basically sort of cherry picking, Stu. Now, the other topic was a teleological argument. You quoted Dawkins. I think you're misquoting Dawkins, but yet again, it doesn't really matter what Dawkins said. So what Dawkins said was that if an argument was going to convince him, it would be the fine-tuning argument. That doesn't mean he thinks that it does convince him. And he actually criticized the fine-tuning argument on that very program. In fact, Justin Briley, the host, who I know, Alex and I know, we've both been on the show, he even joked.
That's Justin Brierley of Premier Unbelievable, who, among many other things, has hosted the radio conversation between Frank Turek and Alex that we covered a few weeks ago, and the conversation between Alex and Ben Shapiro that we covered several months back. If you want to watch some of those old conversations, some of those past debate reviews, there's a whole bloody playlist. I believe it's linked in the description. If not, then whoever's producing these shows is not doing their job and should be fired.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, you gave an inch and they took a mile," referring to people like you, Stu, who are misquoting him, right? He's not saying that it is a convincing argument, only that if an argument were to convince him, it would be that one. No, I agree it's the best argument. I think the fine-tuning argument is the best argument for God. That doesn't mean it's a good argument, does it? That just doesn't follow. You can rank bad arguments. Some of them will be less bad than others. But
ooh, that could be a fun tier list. The you know, like say we take William Lane Craig's top 5 arguments from that old debate against Hitchens, and we do a tier list.
Okay. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be down.
It might be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell, we could even expand it. We could take, like, I don't know, a group of like 5 apologists and take their top 5s and like put them all together. So we end up with, like, you know, 10 to 15 arguments or something.
But you didn't really answer any of the points that I made about either the beginning of the universe. You said that there was evidence for the beginning of the universe. I'd love to know what that evidence is, because the Big Bang was thought to be the beginning of the universe, but that was based off of Penrose-Hawking theorems. And the Penrose-Hawking theorems have assumptions which are basically widely discounted in the community because well, it seems all kinds of things. The community don't accept them. Penrose and Hawking themselves don't think that these theorems apply. And in fact, one of the assumptions is that gravity is always attractive. Well, in 1998, we found that it wasn't. So basically, physicists have abandoned the idea of the Big Bang as the beginning of the universe. And actually, we have a survey coming out very shortly where that was one thing. We asked controversial topics in physics to physicists. And the thing that they agreed upon the most is that the Big Bang should not be considered as the beginning of the universe. So tell me what evidence you have to back up that claim that you made, that the Big Bang was the beginning of or there's evidence for a beginning.
And even if the Big Bang were the beginning of the universe, that indicates absolutely nothing about what instigated that event.
Of the universe, I don't see it.
Do you want me to go, or am I talking? We're talking too much. Why don't we switch to you guys? Because I could give 10 arguments right now on that. But
well, yeah, maybe I can respond to Stuart. You did something which I like to call the genetic fallacy. Of course, it is fallacious to suggest that because you came to a belief through an unreliable method, that belief must be false. That's not quite what I'm saying. Because, of course, in the case of God and belief in God, we're told that there is a God who proactively wants people to come to know him and is in charge of the systems by which people engage with each other and learn about the world. And so if it is the case that you are, and of course you said 75% of people, reject the religions of their parents, that means that there are 25% who don't, and you're just one of those. You may be an exception, but it's an exception that proves the rule, right? And the rule is that you can reliably predict what somebody will believe about God, and therefore, on your worldview, how correct or incorrect they are in their assessment of the nature of the divine, based on where they grow up. And my question, I can't now, of course, that doesn't mean that it's false because they came to it through those methods. But I would say that it's unexpected that God would allow people to go so wrong, so inculpably wrong as well, if in fact he wants to reveal himself equally to everybody. The question I have is, what is more likely? What better explains the reliable geographical spread of religious belief? Is it that there is a God who wants to come to know all equally, but for some reason, nations of people and cultures throughout history unanimously decide on different theologies, and many of them get it wrong, and some of them happen to get it right? That's one explanation. Another explanation is that religion is a byproduct of local mythologies and political and military influence. I think it's at least better explained on that hypothesis.
Oh, it's not just better explained.
Yeah.
It's a testable hypothesis.
Yeah,
it's a thing that can be falsified. And you know what? We've tested it. And so far, we have failed to falsify it.
Correct.
So I wanted to ask specifically on the geographic spread of religious belief. It doesn't prove that religion is false, but do you at least think in isolation that this is better explained on the hypothesis of religion as a sociological project than the hypothesis that there is really a God who exists?
You have to include secularism and atheism then too, if you're going to do that. Like you don't get a free.
Fine.
You don't get a free.
Absolutely. So you pointed out that most atheists are white men in Western European countries. Okay, but remember that on atheism, on the belief that atheism is the case, that is expected because we believe that religious beliefs are a product of your environment. That would include atheism. That would include secularism. It may be that the reason I'm an atheist is because of the country I was born in, but that does nothing to undermine atheism. It makes me kind of lucky to get the truth if it is in fact true, but it doesn't undermine the truth of atheism to say that I may be an atheist in part because of where I was born. In the same way as it does undermine Christianity to say that you're a Christian because of where you're born and I'm not a Christian because of where I'm born. You see what I mean? Can you see why I think that's different?
Yeah, I mean,
it is a different thing for a couple of different reasons. For one thing, most atheists alive today were formerly religious. They didn't convert to a different religion. They deconverted entirely. And that's a different thing. But also, every religion ever on every continent, in every society through all of history, people have deconverted to become atheists. All of them have had atheists. There is no religion prior to 2,000 years ago where a person deconverted from that religion and spontaneously became a Christian, because there was no Christianity. There is no point in history before 500 BCE or whatever it was where a person spontaneously deconverted and became a Buddhist. Atheism crops up because doubting the mythology that you were raised in is the default position when you're no longer convinced. It's just not being convinced. That's all that means. So it is a significant, it's a category error. Alex is being gracious and putting it together, saying, oh, sure, if your parents are atheist, you could be brought up atheist and just believe it because your parents believed it. But it is the actual default. It's a separate category.
I mean, I know that I can see how that follows, but I would ask you, what then is true revelation from God, and what exactly is saving faith then in your interpretation? Because it feels like you're sort of putting that in a box. How do you know it could not be different for different people? How do you know that God knows or doesn't know whether someone will actually accept him before he puts them in a certain locale throughout the world? Why is the Christian faith the most malleable worldview, according to Black professor, whose religion is it? He wrote, Laman Sana, one of the most respected philosophers at Yale, who passed away not too long ago. He said that the Christian faith, the average Christian is white female, and the Christian faith is not bound, it seems, by a social construct. And the genetic fallacy breaks down, he would say, largely because you see in Africa, 0 to 40%, you see the hub of Christianity move from places like Palestine over to places like Europe, then the US, now China, Africa, South Korea. Atheism doesn't do that. So which is a social construct more likely? And I would say atheism.
I think all of it is socially constructed or socially dependent, all of it, including atheism. But that's not a problem. Like, for me to say, you've just said that Christianity is the most malleable world religion. Might that not do something to explain?
atheism only exists as a thing because theists made a claim. That's the only reason it exists. There would be no atheism if there's no theism, because nobody would be saying that there is a God for us to say, well, I don't believe you.
Yeah, much like you know, all the time I'm running around just announcing in YouTube side chats that I'm an ablearnystonist, because, you know, that's a thing that people are claiming. So I have to refute that claim all the time. Yes. For those of you who are fairly new, that's Mark's pet thing, is there's an infinitely powerful rock. And
yes, the Blarney Stone. Mm-hmm.
In its success, the fact that it is just so malleable, maybe that's why it's so easily spread, because Christianity can adapt and change into the societies that it enters, oftentimes through military conquest. If that's the case, if that is indeed the case, then like, what is being undermined about my position here? I believe that religion is a sociological phenomenon that naturally evolves, and the ones which evolve better to the societies that they land in are more likely to survive. That's essentially what you're telling me, and that is completely in accordance with everything that an atheist believes. But as a Christian, you need to believe that this is being guided ultimately by God, by the Holy Spirit, by whatever. This is being guided and supervised. And then you have to explain why it is that the Thai are orders of magnitude less likely to accept Christ than New Englanders. I mean, well, why do you think that's the case?
How do you know that?
You know, it'd be really neat if aliens showed up and had a religion. Like not their own religion, but like they confirmed, for example, that the ghost of Joseph Smith appeared to their ancestors and conveyed the words of Mormonism, and they have the actual Book of Mormon word for word,
right,
from the ghost of Joseph Smith. That would be pretty compelling, that maybe Mormonism is true.
Yeah, just saying. That would be good. That would be evidence. That would be strong evidence. But here's the thing. It's sort of like this. It's kind of like they can't come up with any strong evidence. And this is where sort of faith takes over. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to believe it in the absence of evidence, or I'm going to believe this weak evidence as strong evidence, kind of thing. That's where the faith part comes in. And it really is not like, I could do that with literally anything. You know, I could look at string theory and say, well, I'm going to have faith to think that is overwhelmingly strong evidence, but it's not.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. That aliens thing, incidentally, also comes from a book. I love my books, just, you know, not that one, because it's horrible. The life lessons it teaches are bad. The books are called the Black Ocean series, by J.S. Morin. The first bunch is called Galaxy Outlaws, and it's set in a sci-fi future where Earth has unified under a version of Christianity called the One Church. They've like put all the Christianities together and harmonized the differences, and all the other there are a few heretics who still practice Buddhism and whatnot, but it's Christianity, because the first aliens that humans encountered also believed in Christianity. Two different species. Incidentally, the turtle people only got 6 commandments, not 613, because they were inherently more moral.
and what is acceptance? Like what is acceptance? Like, I don't want to be a universalist here.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
What to you is acceptance, revelation, and the correct theology? Like, sure, I'm buying into what all that you're talking about. Yeah, that makes sense potentially, but I still want to hear from you. It sounds like you have a very tight, nice definition of what saving faith really is, what that looks like.
Well, I don't, because I'm not a Christian, of course. If universalism is true, then this problem goes away. If it's the case that to be saved isn't to be nominally Christian, it's to just say, do the will of the Father, you might find that more people in Thailand are doing the will of the Father than people in New England are. That would also get rid of the problem. But if you believe that there is any doctrinal necessity in Christianity, if there are particular things you need to believe in, like you need to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, it's not just that he resurrected, but that you believe he resurrected and choose to throw yourself on that. If there's any doctrinal element whatsoever, then we know that societies worldwide vary in their ascension, in their ascending to these propositions, statistically reliably based on where they come from. And that to me is a mystery. But I totally agree with you that if a universalist is listening to this is completely uninteresting, because what does it matter? Everyone's going to get saved anyway. I don't know if you're a universalist, perhaps you are, right, but the hypothetical nature of your question makes me suspect that you are in fact not.
Well, if you rule out Hebrews chapter 11, Romans 1, Romans 2, then you're spot on. But you have to read those passages. I mean, the patriarchs are going to be saved. They didn't know anything about the resurrection. Nothing. I don't even think they expected that. There was some type of messianic figure, perhaps, that they expected. You have out of, obviously, Isaiah 53 and 61. But then in Romans 1 and 2, this boy in Myanmar who's never going to have the same type of exposure to the gospel as me, how do you know that he's not more like the patriarchs and his faith is not greater than mine, like you had?
That reminds me of an old parable, for lack of a better term. A preacher man comes up to Alaska and meets with an Inuit chieftain and tells the chieftain the good news of Jesus. And the chieftain is like, I find your story strange, but if what you say is true and I must believe the things you've said or I risk eternal torture, then what would happen to me if you had never come and told me? Because how else am I supposed to know, since your God isn't running around revealing himself to everyone, as one might expect? And the preacher says, oh, well, if you didn't know, then it's not your fault for not believing, and you'd be excused from that. And then the chieftain says, well, then why the fuck did you tell me?
Yeah. Why'd you tell me about it if I had a perfectly free ride without it? Aren't you just doing me a massive disservice?
Yeah, you're actually putting me in danger of hell.
Said. So no, I wouldn't land on, hey, I have to have all the evidence correctly given to me from the Bible and from the Passion narratives if I'm going to be saved. That's still, it's tightening the noose too much for me.
Do you think that people who've heard of Christ and know a thing or two about him, but proactively deny that he was crucified, just say, I know who Christ is, I know that there's all this evidence, I don't think he was crucified, I don't think he was God. Do you think those people are saved?
All right, Cliff's about to jump out of his skin here over here, so I better let him.
Oh yeah, we've all noticed. The chat's noticed. Everybody's noticed.
Wait, he refers to his father by his first name. Isn't there like a commandment about honoring your elders or something? How curious.
I don't know. I mean, But like, as I pointed out, Cliff does not like universalism. He is very, so Cliff's this sort of very conservative firebrand, you're going to hell if you don't accept kind of guy. So universalism is the idea that everybody goes to heaven, doesn't matter, like kind of thing, which brings up some problems, solves some problems. It's all a bit up in the air. But now Cliff is going to get angry because Cliff does not like this branch of Christianity. So I predict a sort of Cliff temper tantrum coming on.
Well, that's unfortunate because I think the Universalists have a slightly better claim, but we'll see.
It depends.
I'm a little shocked that I heard that Genesis teaches that there's a steel dome over the universe, over the earth. That is embarrassing. I have read the Bible many, many times over the past 60 years. I can promise you there is no science anywhere in the Bible. Science is a discussion of process, how an organism works. There is absolutely no biology, no chemistry, no physics, no geology, no astronomy anywhere in the Bible. And if
I appreciate Cliff saying so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible does make claims along those lines. But I guess he's saying that like where you might try to read science into those things, like Ray Comfort, 20 scientific truths of the Bible, whatever. Yeah. Cliff is saying it's poetry, it's metaphor.
Right.
Fine.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then why treat it like a history book instead of a book of poetry and mythology like it clearly is? Like, why treat it like it's this official thing that describes everything exactly?
Mm-hmm. That's precisely it. Like you can't have it both ways. Is it historical? Is it God-given factual truth, or is it, Homer's Odyssey rewritten in a more Levant-friendly form?
Someone insists that there is. I think that they have an incredibly wooden interpretation of a book, and it's scary. Secondly, there are problems in the New Testament. There are problems in the Old Testament textually, but I can promise you, it is totally plausible for two thieves nailed to crosses on either side of Christ to heap insults on him, and then for one of them to have a change of heart, a change of mind. There is absolutely no contradiction. There are different perspectives, yes. there's a difference, especially when it comes to the dating of exactly when the Passover occurred. And that's because there's a difference between the interpretation of dating in Galilee versus that in Judea. And it's a well-known fact that they disagree.
Wow,
that's
an excuse. Like, but one said it was before this date and one said it was after. So now he's saying, hey, they had a disagreement in these towns. Is there anything to back that up? Is there any, because we're talking about a event that was celebrated by, I mean, it's Passover, right? It's talking about in the Old Testament, God killing the firstborn son of everybody in Egypt and passing over the people who had put blood on the lintel of their door, right? That's what it's talking about. So you've got this festival that is very well known, and you're saying that in the same country, in two different towns that aren't even that far apart, they had different interpretations of the day that occurred on. I find that very hard to believe, like very hard to believe.
You know, whatever it
Judea
takes to
and
make the story work.
Judea and Galilee are like right next door to one another.
Mm-hmm. In different times, they've been ruled as a single unified thing, though apparently in the time of Jesus, they were politically separate. Most of Judea was like directly ruled Roman province, whereas Galilee was ruled indirectly by a vassal lord who was a descendant of Herod or some shit like that.
Interpretations. So to be all psyched out about different interpretations of exactly when the Passover occurred, I'm afraid is a type of hyperskepticism that if you applied that to all of reality would lead you to be a very lonely, very isolated person. So I'm very unimpressed. I'm also very unimpressed because it's very easy to sit back and take pot shots at different people, a different philosophy, a different religion.
It's interesting since that's what they've been doing.
That's
but
exactly what they've been doing,
Yeah, Cliff, you can be unimpressed as much as you like, but the burden is on you to present a case, not to evaluate your opponent's counter case.
Yeah. But tonight, you put your head on your pillow, and I put my head on my pillow. And like it or not, you're going to have a worldview. I'm going to have a worldview. And Jesus Christ, I've said, is by far the most reasonable, credible, plausible explanation of who God is, of how we are to live our life, the whole dilemma.
We get that's what you believe. You're not actually demonstrating that to be the case.
Yeah.
Like, I get, like, this is the thing. This is what separates preaching from actually demonstrating your case. So with preaching, all you're doing is say, look how much I believe this. I think that Jesus is the most reliable, the most testable, the best, the fittest. He had the best abs. He could do all of these things. He is absolutely the best. What we're talking about when preaching is making these claims with nothing to back them up except your faith and conviction and your just how much you believe the thing. When we're talking about having these discussions, we're talking about having some kind of reason to back up that justification so we can talk about that. Because me just saying, hey, I think evolution is cool and beautiful and it's the best and all of this kind of stuff, and it really is awesome and stuff, it doesn't say anything. We've got evidence for it, and I will talk about that evidence if you do want me to talk about it. We're not just going, well, it's really cool. And that's essentially what Cliff is doing. He's just saying, well, Jesus is cool to me. Great. Demonstrate that what you're saying is true, because without it, what you've got is a baseless claim, and that's all you've got.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of a section in the Quran where a bunch of different believers from a bunch of different faiths all confront Muhammad. And, they all basically do what Cliff did. They're like, well, I'm convinced Jesus is the most plausible, rational conclusion. And, the Buddhist says, I'm convinced that nirvana is the most plausible or whatever. All the different religions, they just declare. Yeah, they say they believe the thing. And there's an atheist who says, well, I think it's most rational to not believe any of these claims. And Muhammad says, well, why do you say that? And he says, because none of them can demonstrate anything better than just saying they believe the thing. So how am I to decide?
Mm-hmm.
And then Muhammad, of course, demonstrates the truth of Allah. And because he can provide an actual demonstration instead of just declaring he's the most correct, everybody converts or something like that. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't speak Arabic, so my versions are all invalid anyway.
We're aware you're just sort of, you know, paraphrasing kind of thing.
Yes. So it's, yeah, you know, Cliff can stand here and say, I'm convinced Jesus is the best thing since Betty White. And Alex can say, I'm convinced that, you know, the Moon Lord of Tarragon is the best thing since Betty White. Cool, you've both declared equivalent statements. If only there were some way to, you know, resolve this issue, perhaps a demonstration or a test or, you know, something more than just saying, I like the thing. If only.
Mm-hmm.
Evil in this world combined with tremendous goodness, and to listen to some people, I won't name names, but to listen to some people use the moral argument to object to animals being hurt in this life, and to prey upon people's emotional appreciation of animal life, and then to try and
hold on, is he seriously accusing Phil of making a fallacious appeal to emotion?
Appeal to emotion, yeah. So, but that means that animal suffering, like having an animal truly suffer, you would have to say that that is not evil. That is a perfectly fine thing to happen, that an animal gets treated in a torturously horrible way and dies in screaming pain. And that makes me worry about your empathy for other organisms in this life.
It is a bit of a problem. So, Wim, it's not that there's necessarily a problem with appealing to emotions on this. It's that Phil wasn't appealing to emotion. He was saying, here is a logical contradiction in your worldview, and this is what demonstrates it. If there's an emotional aspect to that, that's just icing on the cake, but it's not the cake itself. It's the contradiction that Phil was presenting. And
yes,
Cliff is trying to just dismiss it because he can link it to emotion.
So the appeal to emotion generally, when it is a fallacy, it's basically when it is the emotion you feel as the justification or the reason why something is true or false, sort of morally, or some moral fact. For instance, if you're sort of saying, hey, you know, cutting off somebody's leg is wrong because look how much pain they're in, look how much they're suffering, look at all this kind of stuff. That's a fallacy, because whether or not they experience pain and whether you find it uncomfortable is no justification of whether it's good or bad for themselves. If they have gangrene and they're going to die without an amputation, or some kind of flesh-eating bacteria or something and they're going to die, then it may be the right thing to do. Our feelings about these things don't necessarily justify whether they're true or false either. You know, sort of, so an appeal for emotion would be, you know, something like, if somebody says, oh, you know, but most immigrants don't commit crimes, kind of illegal immigrants don't commit crimes. They're very low on the committing crime scale. And you're like, well, you know, I've seen this person go out and do this, and I feel like they're, you know, they're doing this. They might be appealing to emotion to try and make you think that statistic is actually wrong. And that's where, you know, so my favorite appeal to emotion, won't somebody think of the children, right? Like the idea that we want to care for children and that we have empathy and this sense of responsibility to children, that we feel that way, in no way affects whether something is good or bad for that child. We've got to look at what are the outcomes of implementing some sort of policy, whether it is good or bad for the child. So, you know, sort of using emotion in debate, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. We certainly want to connect with people, and emotion and empathy is certainly the way we do that. But we've got to be careful not to have the justifications, the reasons for what we are arguing about, to be simply how we feel about it. Because if that's the case, it is necessarily a logical fallacy.
Yeah, I have a real example. You know, not to appeal to emotion on an appeal to emotion argument. But if I were to tell you that, you know, not long ago, I was strapped to a chair and a man took, you know, hard metal implements and ripped out a bunch of my teeth, that might be an appeal to emotion.
Right.
Now, if I add the context, yeah, but if I add the context that I had an infection that antibiotics were failing to cure and I was going to die if he didn't,
right,
that changes things a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. But like if you were arguing against dentists or dental surgery or something like that, you know, or surgery in general, or, you know, all of these things, and you framed it like the first one, right? Like that he put metal things in you or did this or did that. That's the appeal to emotion fallacy. You're trying to appeal to a sense of disgust in order for people to think this is a bad thing. And when it's not, it's actually a really good thing, absolutely necessary, and the best thing for you at the time.
Yeah.
And use a moral argument that therefore there is no God. That is absolutely ludicrous, because if there is no God, morality is relative. So what's wrong with animals dying? And obviously the Bible never says that animals suffer because
whether morality is relative or we're somehow objective, you should still be able to justify your claim. If you say there's something wrong with animals dying, maybe because Cliff doesn't understand how justification works, how you should be able to ground the things you believe in. Maybe just he thinks just declaring means everybody's declarations are equal. I don't know. It seems to be the way he argues, though. But like, it doesn't matter what the source of morality is. You still have to be able to back up your claim.
Yeah. I don't understand that. It's like that he says if morality isn't objective, there's no epistemology. And I don't see how that follows.
Yeah, it's Cliff expresses it rather grossly, but we do hear similar things all the damn time.
Yeah.
If there's no God, then there's no objective morality, which is also a non sequitur, but whatever. Therefore, the morality that you claim to have is meaningless because I can just assert the opposite. Well, no, because we're not just asserting things at each other. Holy shit.
Right. And it's not just me deciding. Like, I could decide all I want that, you know, murdering someone is moral, right? I could decide that and absolutely believe it. That will not change the ethical structure of society. Society's not going to go, oh, well, Mark thinks it's moral, so therefore it's moral for him. That isn't how anything works. So we're really talking, like, when you're talking about morality, fine, I can have a relativistic morality, but whether that falls into the ethical construction, the intersubjective ethical framework of society is another story entirely. Wow.
Yeah, there's rather a lot.
Yeah, there's so much wrong with what he said there. I don't think I could even get through it all.
I know. It's fascinating to me because, like, we get a lot of criticisms for these shows. Sometimes it's theists who are like, oh, well, you never presented a case for why atheism is true. We're reviewing a debate, folks. We're not presenting our own cases, but that's neither here nor there. Also shifting of the burden, but details. But one that we get fairly often is that we go on too long explaining some of these concepts, that we should just go right through it. And maybe you can make a case for that because we are only 42 minutes in at 3 hours of 2 hours and 53 minutes. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Are we going to be doing the questions at the end? Because I've got a funny feeling a lot of this may in fact be question time.
It's possible.
I would imagine this got a ton of questions, you know, like I would guess.
Almost definitely. Yeah. That does happen rather a lot. And we typically skip the Q&A because it's just a whatever, unless we know there's one that's really good in there that might be fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the flip side, we could do an entire TED Talk on just that last sentence Cliff said. We could do a whole presentation on just that. So we're expounding on the ideas that are being discovered. That's the point of this debate review, is to review the ideas and the strategies, the tactics, and so forth, how well they work, how well they interact with each other. But we expound on them to the extent we think is necessary to explain why we're saying what we're saying, because we're not just asserting shit at each other. But we could go on a lot longer. Maybe we could make it a little bit shorter, but I'd rather be clear than make it so short that it sounds like we're just making assertions. And also, honestly, everybody's here for the shenanigans in the chats. That's just how things are. And if you're watching this later, congratulations for making it nearly 3 hours into a show. If you would like to join that live chat, make sure you not only subscribe, but ring the notification bell and subscribe on Mark's channel too, because we go back and forth every other week. We're over at Mark's place. And if you want to be in the live chat, we'd love to see you.
Because of human sin. Never once does the Bible say that.
Q&A starts at about 1:27 something, or 1.5 hours kind of thing is when the Q&A starts. So we're roughly getting to about halfway now.
Yeah.
If you do want to go to a second thing, I don't think we're going to get through all of it this week.
not at this rate. I mean, we could speed run it, but even if we just let it play
I don't
through,
think it deserves a speed run. Yeah, I don't think it deserves. I think it deserves to be, taken apart. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we thinking part 2 for this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to, more than happy to, actually. I'm finding this absolutely intriguing, especially I really think that the fallacies that I've heard so far, but if this isn't real, then this is the consequence. Okay. It doesn't worry us. It seems to worry you, but that's not a reason to believe it. It seems to be this, well, you don't want there to be, relativistic morality. And you're sort of like, well, yeah, it kind of sucks. It would be nice if there was a nice, consistent moral system that we could all follow and is absolutely true. But what's the actual evidence that that is the case? Not what I want to be true is true.
Yeah, we love to see it. All right, folks, we are at 42:41 on the YouTube copy, which is different from the copy I saved because James went through and edited out the pre-roll intro stuff where the music plays before he comes on and whatnot. So everybody remember where we parked. I did write it down, but occasionally I lose my papers. So yeah, good times. Yeah, so I guess we'll start the wrap-up phase here. So before we go, what have you got coming up this week, my good friend?
Who, me? Oh,
no, my other good friend.
I look, you might have been talking to yourself. I don't know. Be your own best friend. That's what I say.
I've been trying to do that more lately. I'll be like, I'll do a little comforting thing and be like, you're okay. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was talking about this the other day. Like, my yoga teacher once sort of said, "Hey, thank yourself for doing yoga because you don't thank yourself for doing good things." And I went, "Yeah. How do you thank yourself for, like, doing the dishes or cleaning something or taking yourself out to the park or something? Like, be your own best friend and thank yourself for it because it's good. It's good. You're doing something for yourself. Thank yourself. But anyway." I've got Aimbot coming up again on Wednesday. It's still, it's gaining popularity. It's still there. I think the Christmas stream went really well for me that Purple Rhymes with Orange did. And I want to give a big shout out to Purple Rhymes with Orange. They are fantastic and magnificent. I don't know how they got all of that organized and all of that done. Amazing person, amazing Christmas stream for those of us who didn't have family to spend that time with, and just a beautiful, beautiful bunch of people all around. On Fridays, I have Fundamentalist Fails. Last time I did CC and his huge copium mine in Antarctica with the final experiment. That was wild. That was really wild. But I might, because I saw that Donnie Raw Matt and Powell got together to do a why atheists or why the world is young kind of thing, and it was just rife with ridiculous stuff. Like, I'm gonna have to watch it and see if I can make something out of it, but that will probably be next week, because damn, that was awful. Yeah, I am a fine non-hair collector. Absolutely. Yeah, CC is funny. I kind of feel for him though, Sang-Ye. I think that he's got some real anger issues and stuff, so I kind of feel for the guy, because he pops off, and part of it is funny. Yes, he's a flat earther who's like, well, why can't everyone be flat earthers? But at the same time, wow, he's got some serious issues, and wow. Oh, a new heat problem? What's wrong with the old one? They haven't solved the old one yet.
Austin just dropped a new video, and I'm like, hey, we're promoting stuff. Why don't I put it in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thumbnail is a meme, and I'm a sucker for memes. So
I know.
Yeah, so that's in there too. Honestly, Austin's channel is fairly new. 15 videos, 98 subscribers. Not a bad start, but I think we can do better. Now, I know there's YouTube tells me there's 26 people watching right now. I'm going to assume half of you aren't subscribed to Austin.
Oh, that could get him over 100.
Yeah.
I've subscribed. I subscribed, and notifications are on. So, yeah.
So, yeah, that's another thing we do here is we randomly plug community members.
Sure. Why not?
Building community is a thing we care about. So, it happens from time to time.
Oh, and he's talking about the Rate Project as well. That is hilarious. The Rate Project. That's hilarious. The creationists tried to solve the issue, and they basically gave up and said, yeah, it must be some mechanism that we're unaware of. At some point we'll find it in the future, but we couldn't find it. Just like, wow. Let's believe it anyway. Yay!
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you never know with us. I have been known to do 12-hour streams in the past. Not often, but it's happened.
I can't do that. I think if it was just a casual stream, I might. But stuff like this, where I'm actually like really thinking about stuff with my brain, maybe my brain is weak. Maybe I have a weak brain. But
for sure.
I find myself slowing down. Like, oh.
Yeah, definitely. The one I did for my birthday in 2023. I had like a mega presentation set to go. We reviewed videos from Alan Didio and Isaiah Saldivar and Greg Locke, and like laid out a case that there's like this huge evangelical cult that's all spiritually descended from Kenneth fucking Copeland, and reviewed some of the dangers of it. But once I got done with the whole thing, which was 4 or 5 hours, the rest of the time was hanging out with the chat. Like, people came into the room and stuff, and it was just interactive, which is also fun. But I definitely need the lower brain power thing for a really long haul like that. I do wish I had like commercials like Chris Mallard does, so you can like put on something that's 4 minutes long and go refill your coffee, or put on something that's 3 minutes long and run to the bathroom, that sort of thing. It'd make a really long stream a lot easier. But I do digress. As for me, my schedule's a little wonky because I'm currently working 5 flipping jobs, but Mark and I do these reviews next week. As said, we're going to be over on his channel, but same bat time. And then the week after, back over here and so forth, with the occasional deviation when Mark gets a date or something.
So we have an agreement that if either of us have a debate to do or something comes up, we'll just postpone it. We're pretty good with stuff like that. So I really appreciate it, because Saturday night Eastern time seems to be a really popular time for debates. And I feel like I have an obligation to take all the debates I can, because I started as a debate channel. So I really appreciate the flexibility that I get on that. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. And debate reviews, we need debates to happen to have debates to review. So, you know,
Yep.
yes, Wim, I'm very poor. I'm in a really bad financial situation, and one job just doesn't cut it. In fact, two jobs just doesn't cut it. Now, they're not all full-time, obviously. My primary job is as a truck driver, which takes up a huge chunk of my day.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff I do on the side, not counting YouTube, is I ghostwrite for a whole bunch of people. I also write articles and blog posts and things, and I teach classes on some of the online gig assignment things, like tutoring on specific subjects kind of stuff. So it's all very like, I have an hour, let's stick a class in it kind of thing. I'm hoping things get better because I can't keep up this pace forever. However, when I do have time and the ability and so on and so forth, I have been known to go live randomly. And so make sure you have that notification bell rung, because I do occasionally pop up with no notice. Just bloop, here we are, we're doing a thing. And usually those are some of the best shows because I have something to say. That's why I do that. But you can also catch me on Thursdays at 8 Eastern on the Transpositions channel. Now, I do have a lot of links, and so that's why I have the website, betterthanember.com. The front page is basically my link tree, so you can find the Transpositions and the other channels that I occasionally put stuff on also. My second channel was also involved in Purple Stream, so on like that.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate y'all coming by, watching. Future people who are watching this later, I appreciate you too. And everybody in the live chat, we've had some lively conversation. We've had some great suggestions. This is why we do live shows instead of Mark and I pre-recording these. I appreciate all you folks ever so much. And continuing with my trend of stealing other people's outro lines. Never stop learning. Good night, folks.
Just like a spark that's breaking out, can't make a stop, can't turn back now.